Hey guys, it's Mike here from Laughingstock Media, and in this video, I am going to be creating the ultimate video with the ultimate power scale that will finally allow me to overcome the evil, dreaded main villain of Laughingstock Media on this channel, which is the algorithm. Assuming it doesn't get like 200 views. But anyway, I'm going to, in a single video, power scale the entire Cell Saga of Dragon Ball Z. You know, the arc that I really like to talk about the most, obviously. I mean, just look at my profile picture. It's literally Perfect Cell wearing a Laughingstock Media mask. It's pretty cool. But anyway, with that being said, I have been wanting to do something like this for a very long time. As you guys know, I've done a lot of videos over the years power scaling the Cell Saga in different ways, whether it be versus battles, ones that already happened and how they would conclude, or what if versus battles. And then additionally, not just that, but also, how strong was Gohan comparative to Goku? How strong was Vegeta comparative to Goku at different points in time? How strong was Torankasu? Mirai Torankasu, the son of Vegeta, who often would use Vegeta's technique. And so as a result, what we're going to do is we're just going to go through every single page, every single chapter of Toriyama Sensei's original Dragon Ball manga and get it directly from the source as we go in depth into the power scale of the Cell Saga. And of course, along the way, this is going to be including my own personal estimations of these characters. You might strongly disagree with me on some of them. You might even agree with me on some. Or just, hate everything I say in this video and hate, everything I don't say. I don't really know. It doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, I encourage you to give me your own power levels, your own scale, everything like that down below, because I'm going to be giving some of those along the way too. Because as you guys might know, in the Cell Saga, some things change. They become a lot more ambiguous. And thus, as a result, that's why I'm going to explain to you in depth what I think from many, many years of reading and rewatching the Dragon Ball story, what everything is, who's the strongest of all, and could they beat Goku? I mean, literally, some of them do. So yes. But anyway, let's get into that right now. But before I begin, I just wanted to let you all know, since I am a YouTuber and I have to give a shameless plug, especially because I'm now also an author, that my new book, The Children of Amon, Nemesis of the Absence, is now available. And this is a book series I've been working on for 15 long years, except for if you're watching this in the future, and then even longer, because I have even more coming out in the future. This is book 1, which has the character Seraph, who is using the fundamental forces of the universe in order to fight in the name of vengeance against the evil of the absence, and that much more. We got a band of thieves, we got action, we got adventure, we got fight scenes, we got power scaling, we got everything else that you might enjoy and more. And you can see that down below in the description, a link there, the pinned comment. And if you were to pick up a copy, you can get a physical, you can get a digital, you can read for free through Kindle. It's up to you. Hope you enjoy. If you do. With that being said, let's get directly into the Cell Saga of Dragon Ball Z's manga, which in America has been split in English-speaking countries and oftentimes into Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z. I mean, I got the whole manga, as a matter of fact, right behind me. However, just in case, I often will talk about this in the description or in, my videos, you will know that it's actually originally just the Dragon Ball manga by Akira Toriyama. Just wanted to make that note if I keep saying the Dragon Ball manga along the way, for anyone who's new here. But the Cell Saga in the manga begins with, the arrival of two characters. We got Frieza, the main villain of the last arc, whose cells are, of course, used for Cell. And then, of course, we also have his daddy, Big King Cold right here, right? The king, the former emperor of the universe, before his son stepped in. And that's where we first really begin with a lot of this stuff. As we see, we get a lot of the characters flying forth in order to confront these two characters. And here are some of our first statements about their power. We have Gohan talking to Krillin, and I'm just going to pronounce it Krillin because it's too hard to pronounce it Kuririn, or however it's supposed to be in the Japanese. And what does he say? it feels like Frieza, and there's another ki with him that feels the same way. Now, in the anime version, I believe that there actually is a line which is talking about this with Tien saying it as well. But in the manga, it's Krillin and Gohan, and Krillin essentially confirms this right here. He says that it's pretty tough to miss a ki that huge, you know? So essentially, they're comparing the power of King Cold to Frieza. There's another huge ki along with him. Later on, of course, what happens? Well, let's keep going. We'll see that when the two of them touch down, we begin to have other characters talking about how they sense their power, why they're actually there, and so on and so forth. Now, when they arrive and touch down, everybody is talking about how insanely more powerful these characters actually are. But here is another little statement when it comes to King Cold and Frieza that might tip it in one direction or another. That's not all. He gets much, much stronger than that. This is what Gohan is saying. Gohan, of course, fought against Frieza. He sensed every single form that Frieza had on Namek at the time, and thus as a result, he has a better idea and understanding of their strength comparative to one another. So this is where we get into the first question in terms of these antagonists that are right here, and just how powerful they actually are with King Cold and Frieza. Is King Cold as strong or maybe even stronger than Frieza? After all, we see that he's in this form, or in a form that looks like second form Frieza, and then we have Mecha Frieza right here. Now, it is worth noting that Mecha Frieza makes mention shortly hereafter, where he actually talks about how he is stronger than he was when he was on Namek. Because with the robotic enhancements that he has been given after his body was rebuilt after Goku defeated him as a Super Saiyan, a Super Saiyan, well, guess what happened? He became even stronger. He was already the strongest naturally born being in the universe, potentially, but he became stronger than this. However, I think that you can argue, some people have over time, that maybe this guy right here, King Cold, is somewhat comparative to Frieza's power. Is he stronger, though? Personally, when you go in and you read the manga and you watch the anime, I think that some of the implications are that he is not as powerful as Frieza. First off, we don't actually know if King Cold can transform. I've done specific dedicated videos over the years about both of these characters, King Cold and Frieza's powers comparative to each other. I've additionally done videos talking about can King Cold transform and just how strong was he. Personally, I would say that he is not as powerful as Frieza, his son, that we could see right here, when he is standing right next to him. Now, what about compared to Namek? Again, I don't think so, because look at the ordering, and this tends to be very important when it comes to power scaling in the manga. Look at the ordering of the statements, because first off, when they're flying here, they talk about how strong the other ki is that's with Frieza, which of course is King Cold. They say at first that he feels like Frieza. He feels the same way. This could mean either the same power or, the same kind of evil, the same kind of family they're a part of, whatever. We see this later on when Trunks transforms. Now, with that being said, again, look at what is said when Yamcha is sensing the power of both the fighters, and he talks to Gohan about this. He again says, Frieza, you mean to tell me that he has a ki this unbelievably huge? And then Gohan says, that's not all. He gets much, much stronger than that. So that implies to me right then and there that King Cold is not as powerful as Frieza. He is as powerful as whatever Frieza's current suppressed level of strength is. And thus, as a result, his power level is still somewhere in the millions, maybe tens, maybe 100-ish million, who knows, 80 to 100 million if you want to include power levels. I know people quote Team 4-Star all day, every day about that. But either way, you will get that statement, that implication that Frieza probably is stronger than his father, probably already was on Namek because of the fact that, Gohan says he gets much, much stronger. And thus, years ago, I think I gave King Cold his own power level of maybe around 80 million. Let's say something like that. Now, it's hard to say just how much stronger Frieza is. So for all we know, King Cold's power level is even less than that. Maybe it's low millions, if that. But Frieza does say right here that if the two of us work together, we're sure to defeat him. Now, if King Cold's power level was like 1% of Frieza's, then that wouldn't make any difference. Like if Frieza thinks that he is strong in terms of close to Goku's level of power. Keep in mind that he's referencing Goku on Namek, not post-Yardrat, which we'll get to soon. And not just that, but additionally, also the fact that he is not somebody who could sense power levels. Maybe he has this built-in scouter right now in his components that you could see, but he couldn't sense Goku's power. He just fought him. And Goku at that point, just like Frieza, they were pretty much exhausted. So you can argue that neither one was actually at full power. In fact, you can go on my channel and see another video about did Goku and Frieza actually fight at full power, where I think that there's a strong argument that they did not. And if they could, then they would have done so at a, well, shortened degree, not just the less than 5 minutes it took for them to, have their battle and stuff after Frieza blasts the planet. So either way, we then go on to see who arrives. Well, that would have to be the arrival of Mirai Tarankasu as I blow out all your speakers. Fortunately, today, I am wearing my my inspiration for Trunks, which is the shirt bearing my favorite video game character from my favorite video game franchise, Link. And while Trunks is very much like him, a hero of time, except for in Dragon Ball Super, where he's just kind of a failure of time. But anyway, as we keep going, we see this guy shows up. Now, in the Cell Saga, power levels, Toriyama did away with them. He really did away with them at the end of Frieza's arc, on Namek, essentially. In that arc, Frieza, well, he had a power level of over 1 million in his second form, and that's really the last power level we're actually given. There are guides, which for instance will have the guide saying that Goku's base power level is 3 million when he went to fight against Frieza, that his power level increased by 50 times with Super Saiyan to 150 million, whereas Frieza's final form was 120. So we can keep that in mind, but when they go to scan his power level, it says right here it's a 5. This is the last ever power level we actually get other than Kiri ratings, the Killies in the Buu Saga. So with regard to that, of course, Trunks is suppressing his power output down to the absolute minimum. He's tricking them, and also because of the fact that he's able to suppress himself so that he doesn't waste any energy, something that becomes extremely important as this arc goes on. He effortlessly kills these weak soldiers. They probably have power levels, honestly, in the thousands, so they're not weak compared to the vast majority of the universe, but they're weak compared to our fighters right now. They're just here as eye candy, kind of like in the prequels where the Jedi just slice and dice all the droids and stuff, except for when the plot says they shouldn't, in order to look cool. And Trunks definitely does. He's slicing and dicing every single android right here. Then he steps up to fight against King Cold and Frieza, saying that he's going to be able to kill them and that he is also a Super Saiyan. Awesome scene. Battle Point Unlimited play in the background, guys. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah. And then here we go. Now at this point, we have Frieza fights against Trunks. And well, when their battle happens, especially in the manga version, it does not last long at all. Frieza gets annoyed, and Trunks at this point was saying, go full power against me. Use everything you got, and I'm going to kill you. Now, let's keep in mind when he is saying this, Frieza in the manga does not seem to really listen at all. He fires one blast, and then he just assumes that he won. And so Trunks uses his cool move where he does all the hand motions, which I believe are a callback to... Of course, I'm going to butcher this name. Was it Bodhisattva? Something like that, which is the kind of Buddhist idea, the Eastern mythologies in their beliefs idea of gathering the latent ki from within your body and using different hand motions in order to get it to essentially kind of flow into your hands so that you could then in turn do this move that Trunks is doing right near here, which I think is the burning attack, maybe burning attack, but maybe that's another one. Names have never been my strong suit unless it's Cell, and then, I could talk about that all day. But either way, the fact is that we got right here, we got Trunks using this attack, and at that point, Frieza jumps up in the air distracted. Trunks chops him in half, and then slices and dices him after that point and vaporizes his body. So the manga, way faster pacing generally than the anime. I mean, obviously, right? But even beyond that, well, was Frieza really going full power here? Personally, I don't think so. That's another little thing that a lot of people have questioned over the years, just how much stronger is Trunks really than Frieza here as Mecha Frieza? Now, that's a question again as well. See, obviously, if Frieza went full power, wouldn't you see the same sort of thing that's happening right here with Trunks? Sure, he has robotic enhancements, but he does not drape himself in his ki aura like Trunks is doing. He does not, stand there and scream and power up. This is my full power, 100%. He doesn't do anything like that. He just fires one attack at Trunks. He gets pissed off. He fires a blast. That's it. That's not his full power as far as I'm concerned. So, we know that Frieza is stronger, right? So with that being said, how much stronger is he? Is he multiple times stronger, or is he slightly stronger? Personally, I would lean more in the slightly stronger direction. That's one thing you're going to be seeing throughout the course of this video. I don't personally think that all the characters get millions of times stronger in this arc, or even as strong in terms of multipliers as they did in the previous one. Instead, I think that as the characters generally got stronger, well, their powers didn't necessarily continue to balloon exponentially. And so with regard to Frieza's power, he was already 120 million. I could see him maybe being closer to Goku's power on Namek. So let's say 140 million, something like that. He didn't really know how strong Goku's power level was. He didn't actually sense him. He fought him, and Frieza is an extremely arrogant character in the first place. So I could see him still being weaker than Goku on Namek and thinking he could beat him because, well, he's the one who Vegeta lived under for years, and both of them are really great at pointing their thumbs at themselves and saying that they're going to win, and then they get whooped, harder than, Charlie Murphy when he faced Prince in a basketball game. And so as a result, what's going to happen? Well, they lose. And so I would say that personally, in terms of power levels, if we're judging right here, I would say that maybe Trunks is a little stronger than Goku was on Namek, and that Frieza, of course, is probably weaker. I would say that Trunks' power level I've often viewed as being somewhere around maybe 170 million. And Frieza's maybe 140 million. Maybe, hey, you could say it's 160 million. You could say that Trunks really caught this dude off guard and he killed him because he didn't go full power. Even in the anime, because people will always point out the anime where Frieza goes, oh, this is my full power. And he does like the finger beam and he drops a giant ball of death on him. Frieza used that attack when he had 530,000 power level and he blew up Planet Vegeta. That doesn't mean anything. Him using a giant blast does not mean he's at full power or really trying as much as he did against Goku on Namek. And so that's the way I see it. Trunks was stronger than full power Frieza, but if he really tried as hard as he could, and so did King Cold, and they fought him at the same time, he would have a much harder time beating them than he did right here. Trunks did not hold back. He went full power and sliced and diced and murdered Frieza right in front of his father. And then, well, he goes on and do the same thing to King Cold. Now, I do want to point something out here. When Trunks first powers up and goes Super Saiyan as well, we have a statement again about the quality of ki and the type of energy. And so Gohan thought that Trunks was actually his father because it was the same ki that his dad had back then. So again, one thing to keep in mind is that in Dragon Ball, it's not always power level that they're referencing here. It could be the actual tangible feeling of ki. We actually see this later on with Cell. That's how they could recognize who a character is. And also sometimes when the character changes in terms of their mentality, in terms of their spirit, like Gohan the Buu Saga, for instance, when he gets ultimate, and then he starts flying toward the characters, they have no idea who he is, not because the ki necessarily is like, it's always Gohan, it's always the same thing, it's power level. No, it's because he has changed as a human being as well, and thus the feeling of his ki along with the energy also changed. When you're a Super Saiyan, you have like Super Saiyan ki. That's why they glow yellow in the anime version, and also certain versions of this. Like in this, originally Toriyama had them have white hair with red eyes, which I think would have been cool to keep that. But personally, the golden look is still iconic. Either way, I think that you could argue that maybe this means that he was around the power level of Goku on Namek if you take that literally. But at the same time, I think that there's an argument to be made, of course, that he is stronger, I would say so, and that Gohan sensed the feeling of the Super Saiyan ki. At this point in time, we do have King Cold steps down to fight against Frieza's killer, Trunks, and he offers him the role of being the new strongest being in the universe. So that, again, tells us that King Cold is weaker than his son, and that Trunks is also, obviously way stronger than King Cold. At this point in time, he thinks that it's just because of Trunks' sword that he was able to beat him. And what happens? Well, Trunks kills him with ease. He literally stops the sword in his hand. Of course, he is draped in aura when he does this. In the anime version, he's not, for whatever weird reason. I think it's because of how Toei misunderstands how Toriyama actually sets up how his in-universe powers work. Because, typically, when Trunks swings his sword, he's imbuing it with ki. It's not just because he's really strong physically. It's because he's placed ki into the blade. Well, same thing is happening here. He puts up his defenses and his aura, grabs that blade in his hand, and thus he is not going to have his hand cut through by a guy who has millions of power level, as he would if he wasn't really trying in that case. In the anime, again, they try to make him look even more badass, but I think it doesn't really make as much sense as how it's explained. Plus, there's no begging about this here either. So in terms of the other characters, I will get into them soon when it comes to the time skip. But, we have a bunch of stuff that happens at this point leading up to the arrival of Goku, and this is when he and Trunks meet each other. So at this point in time, we learn about things like the fact that Goku has the Shunkan Ito teleportation, and he basically says that that's all he really had time on Yardrat to do, to be able to become a Super Saiyan at will and use the Shunkan Ito. So realistically, he's not that much stronger than he was on Namek, because after all, he didn't have anyone to spar with. He mostly just learned how to use his Super Saiyan at will, and again, how to learn the Shunkan Ito. Sip of water for the working man. Well, guess what? This leads into the two of them sparring. Goku becomes a Super Saiyan, and so does Trunks. We see how shocked everyone is, and no wonder he could take down Frieza. Now, this is Goku fully rested. I don't believe he got a Zenkai after his fight on Namek. That's another thing I'll bring up. I do not believe that at this point in the story that characters actually continue to get either large Zenkais or even Zenkais at all, and rather that Zenkais might have been something instead preparing their bodies in order to be able to attain a higher evolution of their physical nature, which is the Super Saiyan. That's why Goku, instead of just getting another giant Zenkai when he's fighting Frieza or scaling up to his opponent like they do in Dragon Ball Super, the continuity is different in Dragon Ball the manga, and Dragon Ball Z, the anime, where they don't just continue to get stronger and stronger as they're fighting their opponent without healing and everything like that. No, instead, the only time they're going to get a Zenkai boost, if they still do get one, which none of them are ever mentioned in this arc except for with Cell, is when they, come back from near death. Goku and none of these other fighters are coming back from near death at this point in time, and there's no super powerful character for them to scale up to that they can actually sense the power of, which brings up the androids, why they don't get Zenkais and just defeat the androids easily, why they don't get gigantic boosts in power and just kill the androids with one poke, because that's not how Dragon Ball Z worked. That's only how Dragon Ball Super works. So keep that in mind. This is a different continuity of scaling than Super. Otherwise, they would never lose to the androids. They would just kill them all in their base forms and never have to transform at all because they trained off screen for more than 2 days or 4 months or whatever else you want to say that happens in Super. But anyway, let's keep going. So at this point, we do have it where the two of these characters spar. Trunks goes to attack Goku, but of course Goku doesn't sense malicious intent within him, and thus as a result, he doesn't try to block. But this time, Goku does the same thing that Trunks is doing when he swings his sword, imbuing it with his ki, but this time imbuing his finger with ki. So a lot of people put a lot of stress into this particular aspect here. Goku is literally defending himself against Trunks with one finger. Now, at this point in time, we do see that Trunks is sweating a little bit. However, whether he isn't necessarily because of the effort, rather he is saying that, you know, he's super impressed by the power of Goku. You could read it either one of those ways. The fact of the matter is that he says amazing, that you're even better than the stories that I've been told of you. This is the same sword that I used to slice right through Frieza. Nobody ever remembers this next part, but Goku says that's only because you weren't trying your hardest. So keep this in mind. Trunks was not trying to kill Goku here, obviously. If he went back in time and chopped Goku up, then that would have ruined the entire reason he went back in time to begin with. And so as a result, he didn't go full power, and neither did Goku. So you could still say that Goku is stronger than Trunks, especially based upon this statement. But again, in terms of ordering, this statement here about how Trunks wasn't trying his hardest came afterward. Now, I was going to get to it later on, but I will bring it up briefly in case you guys forget. Gohan implied, future Gohan, in Trunks' backstory, which is way later in this manga of the arc, that Goku was still more powerful than Gohan in the future at this point in time. We had assumed that it's this point in time here with Yardrat Goku, because the fact is that, well, that is the last strongest version of Goku before, you know, the divergence in the timelines. He would have theoretically trained harder and so on and so forth that he would have experienced. Now, in the future timeline, Goku killed King Cold and Frieza, not Trunks. So it's worth keeping that in mind, that if Gohan was weaker than Goku here, and if Trunks and Gohan are relative to one another, then that would mean that you could argue that they're both weaker than him and maybe weaker than Goku was on Namek. But again, when it comes to their power levels, I would still give Goku an edge here and say that maybe his power level was like the upper 100 and something million. I don't think that he got a giant boost. Like, again, Vegeta trains in Dragon Ball Super and learns Spirit and all that other stuff and gets a huge boost and everything. That didn't happen with Goku here. He barely had time to train, and he just learned the Shunkan teleportation and how to go Super Saiyan at will. So somewhat stronger than he was on Namek. Not a big difference. But with that being said, that leads into the years of training that come afterward. And we can even see that right here. Toriyama actually drew this, which weirdly the anime did not show it to us, with regard to seeing everybody training side by side. Now, let's talk a little bit about the powers of these different characters, because again, this is something that becomes very ambiguous and something that a lot of people over time and over the years have speculated about how strong they believe the characters actually are with regard to everything here. So right before this happened, let me show you. We have a scene where Piccolo tells everybody that if you don't believe, so let's see. He says right here essentially that if you guys do not think you'll be powerful enough in order to fight and to be able to endure the upcoming battle in 3 years, then don't bother showing up. So a lot of people over time have said and argued that this means that literally every single fighter that we're going to see in this cool spread page right here is stronger than Mecha Frieza and Future Trunks. Personally, I do not agree with that at all. I think that there is a very, very lacking argument to suggest that Yamcha, Krillin, Tien, Chaozu, Gohan in his base form are all stronger than Super Saiyan Future Trunks. You can even argue that Piccolo is not as strong as he was either, because the fact is that they later on compare him to a Super Saiyan. Again, I'll get into that later on, but I don't align with that. I think that that's another example of people having just insane degrees of power inflation in the Dragon Ball story and the power scaling that they believe in. And rather, I think that these characters certainly do get a lot stronger, but I don't think that some of them got as strong as other ones. For instance, we have Goku here training as a Super Saiyan against Piccolo and Gohan. Again, it's something that's left out of the anime for some weird reason, but Gohan obviously didn't get, let's say this power level at the end of Namek was like around 1 million or something because of the 2 Zenkais he got fighting against Frieza, or, roughly just giant power boost. His power when he raged out made it to where he was able to push back and make third form Frieza use his full power. So I would say that maybe he got a couple times stronger, maybe 3 million, low millions, I would say. For Piccolo, I would say that his power level normally, and I'll get into what that means, would probably be the low 100-something million range, maybe upper 80, 90 million range, but I would say that he's probably a little bit below the Super Saiyan. So like Goku on Namek range, like lower than that, maybe something like that, before he gets into using some of his other powers as well, which I'll get into with his short bursts and everything like that. Goku, I would say personally didn't get that much stronger during these 3 years of training. I know it sounds insane. Why wouldn't Goku get way stronger when 3 years pass? But because, well, he's training with way weaker opponents, and he's training in order to fight against an enemy that he cannot sense, that he can't conceptualize in his mind. And every time characters get huge boosts in power, it's because they can sense and conceptualize the power of a stronger fighter, which we see later on. In this case, they just know that these characters are stronger than Frieza, stronger than the Trunks who showed up, and would be able to kill the Super Saiyan. So they train as hard as they can without knowing what that really means, and they get a little bit stronger as Super Saiyan. So Goku, personally, I would say his power level is maybe like 200 million, maybe a little bit higher than that, but I wouldn't really say it's higher than 225 million. Vegeta, on the other hand, his base form was already like 2 million-ish, 2.5, something like that when he got killed by Frieza. Now, unless you believe in post-death resurrection Zenkais, I don't think his base would be that much higher afterward. He was still weaker than Goku, and as a Super Saiyan, he would have been until he trained under 300 times gravity for 3 years and pushed himself to his very limits and achieved Super Saiyan. At that point in time, when we finally get to him, and I'll get to that later, I'm not trying to spoil this too much for everybody, he is stronger than Goku because he was using way more extreme power training comparative to Goku, and he was training with Goku in his mind. He knew how strong he was because he saw him fight against Trunks, and he saw Frieza, everybody like that. He sensed them. They were his benchmark, and he surpassed them with even harder training. So Vegeta becomes the strongest during these 3 years in time. Krillin, I'd put him in the low millions range personally, maybe 1 to 3 million. Same thing as Tien. I'd put that both of them are basically around the range of power of the base Saiyans. So whatever the base power of the Saiyans are, so like, let's say somewhere within 3 to 5 million range, like 4 million-ish, let's say something like that at this point in time, I would put Tien and I would put Krillin. Additionally, I would say that Tien is stronger, especially based on what we see later on a little bit. So let's say that Tien has a 4 million and that Krillin has a 3.5. If you think that power levels mean anything at this point in time, I'm just throwing them out there for the people who love those power levels, right? And then, of course, we have Yamcha. I'd say that Yamcha is probably maybe like 1 to 3 million. Like, I would say that he's the weakest one not named Chaozu. Chia Pet, and so he is somewhere weaker, but a little bit later on we get an estimate that shows that he is actually not weak at all. So all these characters I would say are in the low millions, with Chaozu maybe being like below, the only one below it. But I don't think that they all surpass Frieza. I think that they just got as strong as they could, but they're just going to be behind everybody because they don't have a Super Saiyan form that makes them dozens of times stronger, if you believe in the multipliers. There are people who believe that everybody's multiplier drops significantly after Namek, and that as a result, Goku's power level as a Super Saiyan is only like 2 to 5 times stronger than his base form. If you believe in that, then yes, you can argue that all these characters are stronger, but that's where the ambiguity of power scaling comes in after Namek. And personally, I would say that every single character here is not stronger than Frieza, but 3 of them are, with those being Goku, Vegeta, and Piccolo. So next up, we have that 3 years passing, and, well, what do we get from some of our first lines? That they're all a lot stronger, and, well, guess what? In terms of Piccolo, well, he does not doubt his abilities anymore. He believes that he'll be able to overcome the villains on display. So we'll have to see what regards that is, well, in regard to. But as we keep going, what do we see? The arrival of androids 19 and 20, also known as Dokata Gero in the Japanese, Dr. Gero in the Japanese, and of course, on my channel, where I like to split the difference and make everybody angry in the meantime, Dr. Gero, Gero Springer, or Gero Seinfeld, whichever one you prefer from the 90s. And so, guess what? We keep seeing that as time goes on, these characters are given other estimates, and we see their powers on display. We have, for instance, when they sense the power of Yamcha. Now, neither one of these characters could be sensed because they're robots. They don't have ki. They are androids in the strictest sense, with the difference of Dr. Gero having his brain in this robot body. Almost like Metallo, except, with a brain instead of an AI or whatever. But in this case, we see them sense the power of Yamcha, and what do they say? That I'm picking up a reading. It far exceeds any known human data. It's an abnormally large energy signal. So tying into, again, the fact that Yamcha is not weak at all, he says that we've already found Goku. It's only at this point when they see him with their own eyes that they say that it's actually Yamcha. So additionally, Gero says that we can obtain a great deal of energy from him. So this again says that even the weakest human, I don't think that, Chaozu's like a Kyoshi, he's a vampire basically, except he's like Blade. He's a day walker. He can go out in the sun, Blade and Gingers, right? And so as a result, what happens? Well, he is super powerful compared to the last arc. He's in the millions, but I wouldn't put him above Frieza. I don't think that Dr. Gero is just going to be like, oh yeah, this guy kind of helped me fuel myself a little bit if he saw Frieza of all people, right? So he Yamcha's Yamcha, and Yamcha, he needs a little bit more respect put on his name, which you could see a video on my channel, which is called Why Yamcha Isn't Weak, that I went really in depth into that. So check that out, guys. But anyway, either way, we see that this right here, Goku in his base form is able to actually punch Gero and knock his helmet off, his hat, whatever. It's made of metal, obviously, which is kind of weird for, a hat, but either way. So he could do a little bit of damage. Now, in Dragon Ball Z, characters can still get caught off guard, but that's because in this case, all of his energy is focused on firing an attack. Goku is charging up to him and hitting him. And it still does not do any actual damage. It just knocks his hat off. So that's something I want to keep in mind for later on for people who try to scale that Gohan. It's like Gohan is able to kick off Dr. Gero. Oh, he must be stronger than Frieza on Namek. No, he was caught off guard sucking Piccolo, right? And stuff like that. So Tien, notice here, is also able to dodge out of the way of Goku's energy, or of Gero's energy. Same thing as Goku. In fact, it looks like Tien has to dodge even further. So again, I think that's a little indicator that Tien's normal power output is equivalent to Goku's in terms of his base form. So let's keep going. At this point in time, we do have the characters fly off in order to fight. And this is when Goku starts to be impacted by the heart virus, which plays a part in how strong he is when he fights against Gero. This is also when Gero explains that they have been using miniature spy bots, which have been able to gather data as well as cells, so, the cells later on, from the characters in all of their battles from the Tenkaichi Budokai, the strongest under the heavens, or the world's martial arts tournament, up until the point in which they went to Namek. They didn't follow them on Namek, but they followed them before that. So they saw Goku use the Kaioken. They saw Vegeta become an Ozaru. They saw like how strong of a big boost these characters got in between. They gathered the cells for Cell at that point in time. However, that's when Dr. Gero stopped following them personally and had his computer take over autonomously through its own artificial intelligence. And thus, in turn, what also happened? Well, Dr. Gero had no idea what happened on Namek or with the coming of King Cold and Frieza and everything like that. He was hyper-fixating on his androids and building robots stronger than Frieza with a box of scraps in a cave, like Tony Stark or somebody like that, right? And so, yeah, either way, what happened next is that Goku goes Super Saiyan and surprises them by showing that he is well beyond their estimates. Now, with that being said, it is worth noticing that this is the first time where it's made very clear that Goku actually isn't as strong as he would have been without the heart virus. Because even though Tien is saying, wow, this is what he feels like up close, and then he says, you know, he's in another dimension, the Japanese variation of this, in the anime, Piccolo, his face tells a different story. He's confused and shocked not because he senses Goku's power and is like, wow, he's so strong. We just saw that he was training with Goku for 3 years as a Super Saiyan. No, he instead shows that, wait, what's going on with Goku? He's not as strong as he's supposed to be, because he knows what Goku's full power is. And we see again, Goku sweating. He's going to go as hard as he can from the start, but as hard as he can is not his full power. So this is also part of the reason why probably Dr. Gero says that it seems you've managed to power yourself up quite nicely. A curious technique. It far exceeds the figures that we calculated for you. However, it is not enough to rattle us, and it's still within manageable perimeters. As it stands now, even number 19 alone can defeat you. This tells us that 19 is weaker than 20. Makes sense. Dr. Gero makes himself the strongest. He's the master, so he wants to make sure that his servant, his slave, essentially, which all the robots are, you know, one of the themes you could argue of the arc, that the Saiyans were the slaves of Frieza, and thus in turn they go on to fight the robotic slaves of the new villain, Dr. Gero. And so it's a battle of, you know, them, and they eventually liberate themselves by killing Dr. Gero, and, you know, it becomes a battle of like the future with the servants of the main villain of the arc. A lot of those cool things that go into it. And so essentially, I would say if we're going to give them both a power level, that Dr. Gero as 20 and 19 are both stronger than Mecha Frieza and Goku on Namek. I know a lot of people over the years, again, have said that they're not because they're energy absorption models. That number 19 must be weaker than Frieza was on Namek, because after all, why would Dr. Gero be able to build robots stronger than Frieza, despite the fact that obviously 17, 18, 16, Cell are all way more powerful. But either way, I'd say that they are, especially based upon what we see next. Because not only did he say that they could still defeat Goku as a Super Saiyan, but then we see 19 fighting against Goku. Goku is going all out here, and he's still able to keep, you know, he has to dodge 19's attacks. He is not doing a Broly or a Gogeta where he gets punched in the face and does nothing to him. Instead, he has to dodge, and he's hitting 19 as much as he can, but what happens? It's still not really doing much to him. And this, again, Piccolo is pointing out, that may be in terms of Goku's power level. So personally in this fight, I'd say that 19 is stronger than Frieza and probably somewhere stronger than Goku on Namek, maybe. But in terms of Goku's power, he's not as strong as he would be at full power. So theoretically, Goku's power probably is not going to be up to his 100, 200 to 250 million power level, somewhere in that range. Let's say 220, 225. He'd probably be closer to like, I don't know, 200 or less. The thing is, again, of course I hit the wrong button, so give me 1 second. The thing is, again, while I'm talking about this point, that Goku and Vegeta, and all these other characters at this point in time, they don't have a static power level. Instead, what's happening here is that they have a kind of baseline power level, which they kind of drape themselves in their energy, they transform, everything like that. And then on top of that, additionally, they will then put out even more power in short bursts. This is almost like Kaioken. So when it comes to power levels in the Cell Saga and moving forward, that's another great reason why Toriyama kind of did away with them. Because the truth is that they actually would not be a single static number. They would be ranges, especially when they get mastered power level, mastered Super Saiyan, and they could have their power level be a 5 or a 500 million or whatever you want to say. I'll give my actual numbers later on when they emerge from the time chamber. But in regard to all of that, characters like Goku and everybody here, they're amping their power even more. So Goku could go from theoretically a baseline 200 million and then, punch with a 250 million or 300 million, something like that. So either way, I would say that Goku's power level is cut by a portion here because of his heart virus. So probably to the degree of where his power level maybe is like 180 million, 170, but then he punches at a 225, like, his normal baseline would have been. Again, these are rough estimates. Either way, Goku is weakened by the heart virus, and the androids, again, are showing they could take a beating and keep on going. 19, he's barely hurt. He's got scuffs, he's got dirt on him, but he keeps going, and the only time he really starts to get the edge, because he's weaker than Goku here, is when he absorbs Goku's energy burst. Now, there is a question of whether or not the androids could absorb an infinite amount of energy fired at them, no matter how high the power level is. You could see that when the blast comes within inches of him, it starts to compress and then go into his hand. So maybe there's like a destabilization field in front of his hand that will stop whatever attack. But I do think that if like Gogeta fired an attack at him, it probably wouldn't work the same way here. And maybe he would just like get overloaded by like Yakon and blow up. Either way, he starts to get even stronger. Goku is huffing and puffing. He just can't take it anymore because the heart virus is really impacting him, which then leads into the next part of this arc, which is, let's see right here if I could actually find it. The point in which we see the characters of the fighting only continues from here. So with that being said, what is going on in terms of the other characters involved in the fight? Well, let's see that right now, because let's skip ahead. We see that Goku loses. We've already talked about the fact that he was losing because of the heart virus. He wasn't at full power. And this is where a big shift happens too in terms of the significance of the characters, because you could argue that a narrative power scale shift also changes here. Because we have right here where Piccolo gets caught off guard by Dr. Gero, and Gero is able to dodge his attack and blast him, and it looks like he's put out of commission. And then Vegeta shows up and kicks him in the face, because Vegeta always shows up in dramatic fashion, kind of like Piccolo in the movies, and which is also another version of Vegeta's technique. And so you could argue that at this point, this is when Toriyama kind of decided that these characters would no longer be the main villains of the arc. And thus, as a result, they almost kind of get nerfed. Piccolo just kind of pops up and he's like, oh, you really think that attack would have hurt me? And, like, I'm so much stronger than that. It's your fault for thinking that. But it's like, Or maybe is it true that actually Toriyama did plan them to be way stronger than they were, and as a result, Piccolo got blasted and put out of commission, and then, it wasn't all like some super intelligent plan that Piccolo had the whole time. That's something you have to worry and wonder about. Either way, Vegeta shows up, and again, I'd say he's the strongest fighter at the time. He goes Super Saiyan right now, and this is when he explains that the reason why he became a Super Saiyan is because he pushed himself to his absolute limits and he was not able to go beyond them. And through his own self-hatred, he was able to break through his own barriers and once again became the one who surpassed Kakarot, which again, he's pointing out, other characters point out over time. And he became the true Saiyan Messiah in some different translations, or the Prince of all Saiyans finally taking his throne once again. We see him fight against 19. This is a stronger 19 who absorbed tons of energy from Goku, as we just saw right over here. And, well, then he takes a punch from him, and still, it barely does anything. He just wanted to give it to him for free. And so he starts beating him. You can see that he's clearly doing more damage than Goku was. He's pulling a Piccolo versus 17 right here, where he's turning into Stretch Armstrong, being punched right through. And, well, what keeps happening additionally is that Vegeta just is kind of wrecking him. However, even then, it doesn't seem like this is really enough to beat 19. He's damaging him, but we're still having Vegeta point out that, you sure are sturdily built. So is it a matter of just the components that Dr. Gero used to make him insanely durable, or is it also that his power simply isn't exhausted yet? Now, as we see, Vegeta starts to have his energy absorbed by 19 and uses this opportunity to rip his hands off in order to then fire a blast. His Big Bang Attack! And he, explodes him. Now, the thing is that Vegeta obviously would have had this attack absorbed by 19. So the question is, why did he do this? Well, as we go on to have it explained after this, when Vegeta powers down and he goads Gero into attacking him, he kind of bluffs him, and Dr. Gero doesn't want to call his bluff. Well, we find out from Piccolo that Vegeta would have lost here. He had so much of his energy absorbed that he could not have actually beaten Gero. And not just that, but additionally, he purposely allowed 19 to absorb his energy during the fight so that he could understand how the absorption works so that he'd be able to beat him. This suggests to me that he still actually wouldn't have been able to kill 19 unless he fired a blast at him, which either means that Vegeta actually wasn't that much more powerful than 19 at this point in time after 19 absorbed the energy from Goku, or that 19 was so insanely durable that Vegeta could only kill him through an energy blast. So I think that that's worth mentioning again in terms of the powers of 19 and 20, that those two characters are so powerful that they clearly are way more powerful than Frieza and would have been able to beat Goku on Namek almost certainly as well. Maybe even future Trunks when he showed up, especially because, Trunks often fights like an idiot and wouldn't understand the situation. He fights to kill, but he also might have fought to kill, like an idiot and died. Now, at this point in time, we have Dr. Gero jump in and try to absorb the energy of Piccolo. At this point, he almost drained all of Piccolo's energy to the point to where he dies. Gohan hits him from behind and knocks him off. Again, Gohan is not stronger than Frieza. Dr. Gero was distracted because literally all of his energy and his focus, his defenses were put into absorbing Piccolo's energy, but he has no real damage taken. This is when Piccolo jumps in and goes to fight him. Now, after taking a sensu bean, the fight begins and Piccolo starts to wreck Dr. Gero, even after he absorbed Piccolo's energy. That's because of what I had referenced and foreshadowed earlier, which is in terms of the fact that at this point in time, Piccolo and the other fighters have a new ability. Essentially, they can use the Kaioken without the Kaioken. I did a video about this a while back talking about why Goku stopped using the Kaioken. And a lot of people just assumed, oh, it's because he has Super Saiyan. No, it goes even further beyond that. And no, not just, Super Saiyan 3. That's the next arc, guys. Pay attention. But in terms of that, they can do something that Goku specifically explained to Captain Ginyu and when he first showed up. Something to keep in mind, when we fight, we can amplify what you would call our energy into huge bursts, which is why the energy you stole from me earlier was nothing to fret over. Now, Piccolo isn't saying that he was suppressed and that Dr. Gero only absorbed the suppressed energy from him. Dr. Gero specifically mentions that, oh, you're going to die because I'm absorbing so much energy. Piccolo mentions how quickly Gohan needs to rush in order to save him. He literally was going to die because he was being drained to death, right? Like, Dr. Gero is going full on succubus here, right? And so as a result, well, Piccolo wasn't saying, oh, I was suppressed, and so, I could put out a higher power level than when I'm suppressed. Dr. Gero knows what suppression is. He followed the Z fighters, and he saw them Goku literally using Kaioken when he fought against Vegeta. He knows all about that. He's not an idiot. He's Tony Stark, but evil. Dr. Doom, basically, or Lex Luthor with hair and an awesome mustache. So he has such an awesome look that even though he's a robot and he could have made himself look like, anyone, he decided to make himself look the same. Talk about a narcissist. So Piccolo, he can go even further than his power level. Piccolo can go from a power level of, let's say his power level is weaker than a Super Saiyan. After all, we see that Krillin says this: he's so strong. What kind of training did Piccolo go through? And he's not even a Super Saiyan either. So that suggests to us that he might not be the power of Vegeta or Goku, obviously, but he is still stronger than them. Or Krillin's literally just saying that he's a Namekian, not a Saiyan with glowing, hair. Obviously, Piccolo doesn't have any. Maybe his antlers would grow, his antennas. But either way, Piccolo's power level can go from 140 million to 250 million in a burst, just like with Kaioken. And so he can do a massive burst in an instant of energy and fire an attack off, a punch, a kick, anything like that. Just like the blast we saw when Goku used one against Raditz, when Piccolo was using the Makanko special beam cannon. They can do all of that in an instant with their punches and kicks. The only trade-off there is with stamina, which is why 17 and 18 becomes such an insanely powerful threat against them. So this is why he could beat Gero and why the energy that was stolen was nothing, because even though Gero literally added whatever amount of power to his already pre-existing power level, let's say they had a power level, 160 million, and he added 140 million, so he'd be 300 million, Piccolo can go from 140 million to 350 million or whatever in an instant with a single punch and a kick and a whatever have you, because the fact that he can do short bursts. His base power level doesn't even need to be that high. He could be, 80 million, 100 million, and still put out more than Goku on Namek or Frieza or the androids because of his training. So I think that that's worth keeping in mind. They have Kaioken now, essentially, without the drawbacks of the technique, which destroys their body. That's why Piccolo and the others never actually have the Kaioken technique in terms of the flaming red aura and everything like that. They just have the Kaioken ability, essentially, of the short burst with everything beyond just like a blast like they used early on. That's what all the years of training and powering up do. Now, Trunks shows up, and I think it's worth mentioning in terms of his power level as well, that Trunks is actually, 3 years have passed in our timeline. However, the main timeline that we follow, but in Trunks' timeline, which is the fourth timeline, and that's a video I talked about in the past, how time travel works. You could argue that 3 years passed for him, or he just kind of went there for like a few months or however long it took to get the time machine all loaded up, and then in turn what happened? He went back to the past. So some people also think that Trunks actually went and, this is a different Trunks. And so essentially he went to his future. He killed his android somehow. Cell killed him. And then there was another Trunks who went back in time or whatever. Again, I talked about that separately. But personally, I never thought that Trunks was much stronger than when he first left. I think he's probably the same power level, and thus he's the weakest of all the Super Saiyans. I would still say that he's stronger than Piccolo, but I would say that, he is weaker than Goku and Vegeta by a good amount by this point. So let's say he's still 170 million power level, if you want to say that. He's the weakest now, even though he was way stronger than his daddy back then. At this point in time, Dr. Gero goes and he wakes up 17 and 18. And then, obviously, they also start to talk about 16, who is, asleep in his pod. So obviously we see later on that 16 is stronger than 17 and 18. Now, in terms of their powers, I think it's actually the best for me to just show you what happens next so that you can get a straight hands-on demonstration. First off, 17, in terms of hands-on, uses a palm strike right through Dr. Gero and easily kills him. So 17 is way more powerful than Gero, even after absorbing Piccolo's energy. But then we get into the fight that occurs after this. Not only do they take 0 damage from Trunks' blast, but we also have the fight after when Vegeta goes to fight against 18. So at this point, when they first start out, neither one of them is going full power. We see that they're just sparring a little bit. 18 is, actually getting thrown back by Vegeta, but she's not taking any damage, and Vegeta is able to hit a little attack. But this is also when we find out that neither one of them are really going full power, or at least that Vegeta explains this to 18. He says that if he was to fight her seriously, he didn't think that the planet would be able to handle the fight itself, which makes sense. I mean, we saw in Namek that weaker fighters with Frieza and Goku were destroying the entire planet with the attacks on display, and they weren't even trying to after Frieza blasted it initially, even before that. But he then tells 18 that she's also not going full power, and that he tells her to not hold back anymore. So 18 agrees, and she goes full power. This is something that so many fans completely miss when they read the manga or watch the anime. They think that 18 is just toying with Vegeta the entire time. That's wrong. She literally says, then I will go full power, and then she does. Immediately, she speeds up, and she hits Vegeta, and even though he is draped in his aura, which is his defensive force field, remember, keep that in mind, she hits him and immediately draws blood from his head. He did not expect for her to be able to be that much stronger than she just was and be able to actually burst through his defenses and hurt him. At this point, Vegeta punches her and it doesn't do anything. She then hits him and she hits him into the wall and she has the advantage. But just because she has the advantage does not mean she's actually significantly stronger than Vegeta. Now, watch what happens next. Even though the two of them are going full power at this point in time, and 18 still has the advantage, Vegeta keeps the fight coming to her. He jumps off the wall after she hits him, he headbutts her, and knocks her down with a double axe handle into these rocks, and then he blasts her. Okay, at that point in time, what do we see? Android 18 has sustained damage as well, superficial, but enough to surpass her own defenses. We see that she has scuffs on her face, her clothes are ruined at this point in time. That does not happen if you are weaker than somebody's passive or even active defenses. She is at full power. If she was so much stronger than Vegeta, like so many people in the fandom think, well, then he wouldn't have knocked her back. He wouldn't have been able to do anything. He would just gotten wrecked like everybody who fought against Broly, right? So again, that's not what's happening. Vegeta bypassed her defenses and hit her multiple times in a way that actually knocked her back. Again, she's still not taking that much damage. She's still stronger than he is. But it's worth noting that, again, none of them are enough for her. Because at the same time, what happens? Well, Vegeta is pushing her back. He's keeping up with her, but she doesn't actually need to win through a power advantage. All she has to do is wear him down. Look at Trunks. Trunks points out, amazing, I had no idea my father was this incredible. He's actually holding his own against an artificial human. Of course, Jinzo Ningen, which could be translated as artificial human, cyborg, android, whatever. Obviously, 18 and 17, Lapis and Lazuli, are not actually robots. They are human beings who have been augmented, depending upon your version of the story at a cellular level, whatever have you. But Piccolo makes mention that the android is gradually wearing him down. The enemy's power is seemingly infinite because she has infinite stamina, but Vegeta's takes a hit with every move he makes, which is true. The only reason why 18 starts to again get not only the better of him to a higher degree, but then does the infamous arm breaking right here is because of the fact that she wore Vegeta down enough to do this. Vegeta, well, he was already a lot stronger than, he was before, than Goku and Namek and so on and so forth. And he was able to keep going against 18 despite being at a power disadvantage. But every time he did an attack, so I mentioned this before with Piccolo, Every single time Vegeta punches, he's not only going to use his 250 million power level or whatever you want to say there, he's also going to be using probably higher than that in a short burst. He watched Goku use the Kaioken. He probably figured out how to do it just like when he sensed Ki for the first time and everything like that. Because if Goku can do something, so can I. And so he's putting out 300 million or 350, whatever have you, to combat Android's 18's power level. And yet, even then, it is not enough because despite the fact that he's able to push her back with her own power level, whatever you'd like to say it is, maybe she's 350 million herself. Let's say maybe a little bit higher than that or a little bit lower based upon your own power scale. I'd say that she's at least twice as strong as Goku on Namek. I'd say even stronger than that. I would say that she's probably somewhere around 2 to 3 times stronger than the initial Super Saiyans that were appearing, 2 to 3 times stronger than maybe Trunks. But even then, I wouldn't say so because of what we see later on. So I would say that's somewhere around 300-ish million for 18. And we know that 17 is a little bit stronger than 18. So that would suggest that in that case, that Android 17 is probably closer to somewhere around, like, let's say 400 than to 350 million. It's interesting. They actually labeled my manga wrong because multiple say part 6, even though I'm literally on part 3. That's a great job, fan translators. Hey, you guys did an amazing job with this. I'm not going to complain. So we see that, 17 and 18 are able to just start annihilating everybody, wrecking them. To be fair, he did attack Trunks from behind, and he's stronger than Trunks, and Trunks was entirely, distracted because he was fighting against 18. Now, one reason why a lot of people do suggest that 18 is stronger than the 18 from the future is because the fact that, as you could see right here, Trunks goes in and he slices at 18's arm and the sword breaks. Now, obviously, Trunks still had his sword intact, so this never happened in the future. So you just argue that they never allowed that to happen. They just had a different personality and so on. But either way, fact of the matter is that Android, you could argue here that makes them stronger, like Trunks goes on to say. But 17 hits Trunks one time from behind, double axe handle, just like Vegeta did, and takes him down. Doesn't knock him out yet, though. Same thing with Vegeta, who's on the ground. He does essentially one-shot Piccolo. Again, makes sense because he's way stronger than Piccolo and Gero, and he starts to take other characters out. Now, maybe if Tien had just used the Tri-Beam right here, the Neo Tri-Beam, he would have been able to kill 17. But yeah, anyway, I have a whole video about that. I mean, to be fair, there are these other characters in the way. Also, it's me. I don't like to make these asides. I do really like how Vegeta flies in to try and help Tien here. He's calling him a fool and stuff, but Vegeta before would just let 17 snap his neck and not giving a damn. But instead, he's like, "You fool," and he jumps up to try and stop 17. So I do really like that. Of course, at this point, 18 is fighting against a weakened, tired Vegeta whose one arm is gone now, because that arm always breaks. And she slams him right into Trunks, who again is not anticipating this to happen. He's not bracing. Boom, takes him down. They take everybody down. So they're all way more powerful than they are. Again, Stretch Armstrong moment with 17 punching Piccolo. Puts him down to the ground. And, well, guess what? Not just that. They're way stronger, and 18 breaks his other arm, at which point Vegeta finally just is KO'd. Trunks also is too when he was thrown into his father, the other way around. His father threw him into Bulma. That's how this happened in the first place. This whole mess started because of that, right? Their whole relationship destroyed the entire timeline. But no, they destroyed all the Yamcha fans' hearts. But either way, you could see that they're all a lot stronger than the other characters, and 16 is that much stronger than them. Now, let's go on to the point to where we're told a little bit more estimates about this. We see that, for instance, we get some estimates here about the power of the characters. Trunks points out that the androids in his future weren't actually as strong as these ones. Again, you could take that literally, or you could just say that they were just playing with him a lot more in the future and he didn't know just how strong they actually were. But also listen to what Tien says here. Again, ordering. This happens after a lot of the other statements are made. We're talking about the man who was able to kill Frieza without breaking a sweat, and even he wasn't a match for the androids. We need to face facts. No matter how strong Goku might be, he won't fare much better than Trunks or Vegeta did. I don't think that we stand much of a chance against these things with Goku fighting alongside us. So, again, major thing to point out. A lot of people over the years have asked, well, and actually here's the point where Trunks talks about how he could give the others a decent fight and so on, but either way, the point is that these androids might be stronger because of time variations, and not just that, but additionally, that these androids are so strong that even if Goku, Vegeta, and Trunks all fought together with all the other Z fighters, that if the two of them teamed up like they did against Gohan in the rain, for instance, that they would not be able to defeat them. Of course, in Dragon Ball Z, as we saw, again, referencing the Broly movie, even though it was made by Koyama and not Toriyama and was with Toei, and you know all the differences. The fact of the matter is that when a character is themselves having as much power as like everybody else around them in one body, they're way more effective than a bunch of people spread out everywhere, because then somebody who's way stronger individually can run over and one shot all the individual components and make it to where ganging up and jumping somebody essentially does not work. And that's why I did that video about what if the Z fighters jump Cell, because so many people are like, oh, they should have just jumped him, they would have beaten him. It's like, no, they wouldn't have, because he would have just one shot all of them and then it would be over. So again, same thing here. They would need individually to be strong enough to win. Otherwise, it wouldn't have made a difference. And so let's get into a little bit later on, because then we actually do have another huge power up that happens. That being Piccolo going to merge with Kami. So when this happens at that point in time, well, he gets way more powerful. This is also where we get the introduction of things like Cell, and eventually he shows up. This is the impetus for Piccolo and Kami fusing to begin with, because Piccolo wanted to fuse in order to kill the androids, but Kami, he disagreed. He didn't think that they were somebody, he basically blamed the Z fighters. He said, well, maybe Trunks' future was different. These androids fought you in self-defense and still didn't kill you. And not just that, but also what happened was that, they might go the way of good. In this case with Cell, that is not the case. Instead, his power and his threat is so great in the eyes of Kami that they have to in turn merge together to be able to overcome and defeat the evil of Cell. Now, when this happens, we see Piccolo gets a huge power up. He goes from being somewhere maybe weaker than the Super Saiyans to being individually stronger than all of them. And thus, as a result, he's able to then fight against Cell when he first emerges. Well, slightly after that. So I'll get more into Piccolo's power level shortly as he goes and fights against 17. But right here, let's talk about Cell's power level. Now, I did a video a while back talking about how strong Cell is when he first emerges from his kind of not chrysalis stage, his like larval stage. After the egg, he turns into the giant cicada. I would say that Cell, when he first appears, is probably comparative to like Frieza, probably a little bit stronger because the other cells that are inside of him. But after he absorbs people through their bio extract, it's almost like the power that Goku gathers when he's using the Genki Dama or the Spirit Bomb. And so as a result, what occurs over time with regard to that is that Cell gets way stronger than like a power level of some person he eats, he drinks, right? He drinks their milkshake, I drink it up, like Daniel Day-Lewis, right? Instead, what happens is that he drinks their milkshake of their biology, and he gets way more than like a 5 or whatever. And so he starts to drink people that have a normal human power level, but their interior allows him to get way more than that. And so he'll drink thousands of people, tens of thousands, as it goes on to say per city, because remember, it's not millions of people in the Dragon Ball cities. King Piccolo killed so many people, and Cell's directly referencing him, that the people on Earth, there's like low millions instead of billions in Dragon Ball, essentially. So that's worth keeping in mind. Either way, he absorbed tens of thousands of people, and thus in turn he's able to surpass Goku on Namek and a lot of the other fighters at the time. Not just that, but he also feels the same, like I said, in terms of the texture or the type of ki as the other fighters. I've mentioned this before with Trunks, with the power they were sensing from King Cold. Gohan references that right here. He says it's Frieza and his father's ki. And then he's like, oh, it's Son Goku and Piccolo and even my dad. And so they feel Cell's energy, but it feels like all of the others because of their cells that are inside of him. They're not saying that he's as strong as all of them individually or combined, because that doesn't make sense either way, but instead that he feels like his energy like them on, like, I don't know, a psychic, energy, empathetic, whatever way you'd want to say, empathic way. However it is that they could feel and sense energy, that's how it feels to them right now. And thus, as a result, we see that the two of them begin to fight, but Piccolo is still way more powerful than Cell. And as a result, he is able to get the advantage. He fires a blast at him. Of course, it doesn't really deal that much damage to Cell, but he's way stronger. He's able to dodge everything that Cell is throwing at him. He's not going full power because Piccolo is in turn trying to use all of this fight in order to figure out who the hell this guy is, and not just that, but also where he came from, why he was in the time machine, if there is more than him, and so on. He fires an attack at Piccolo, but as Piccolo sees it, he's more scared of what it is and the fact that this guy can use a Kamehameha and that he can fire this attack at him. And then he catches him off guard and he uses his tail to drain him. Piccolo, of course, tricks him and he tells him that, he's defenseless and blah, blah. Cell goes on to explain, where he got the powers from and how Dr. Gero's computer autonomously gathered the cells, and that he'll get even stronger when he absorbs the androids. And then at that point again, after being drained partially, he's still stronger. Of course, Cell mentions things like how he can use the Kamehameha, the Genki Dama, and a bunch of other moves that, the other fighters can use. In the Kai, I think maybe just in the English, he does mention the Kaioken, but he never uses that, which you can argue is because either he can't, for whatever weird reason, which you would think that he should be able to, he's using the quote-unquote invisible Kaioken, or he gets Super Saiyan as he transforms and powers up later on, especially when he shows up to fight Piccolo in 17. A lot of ways that you could factor that in. Either way, I would say that overall in terms of power, Cell is still weaker than Piccolo. I'd argue that he is weaker than Vegeta because of what we see next, where he hides from Vegeta. And furthermore, I would say that Cell, in this case Piccolo, whose cells are in Cell, is a lot stronger than Vegeta and Cell. A little thing right here I'll say as a little aside. He does say one of two ridiculously high battle powers I've been sensing has suddenly disappeared, but the second one is still there dead ahead. You could say that by the fact that he's sweating and that he's saying that there are two ridiculously high battle powers suggests that Cell was stronger than Vegeta, so maybe you could argue that. But again, Cell did hide, so maybe it's because he was just trying to evade Vegeta. I actually did a whole versus battle about who would win between the two of them, and I think that you could argue that Cell would actually win if he absorbed Vegeta, but you could argue that Vegeta's pure power would beat him, because after all, he is saying that his power far exceeds what Cell expected. So I would say you could argue that Vegeta is just saying that compared to him, this guy's power level is super high, but either way, the only one that I would guarantee is stronger than Vegeta here is Piccolo. So how many times stronger is Piccolo? Well, maybe up to twice as strong, but I don't even know if that's the case because, again, we'll go later on into the fight that happens soon with regard to Piccolo versus Android 17 and just how strong they are. Thus far, I'd say that Piccolo, it's more like when Piccolo merged with Kami, it wasn't just that he got like a multiplier like with Nail. Instead, the way that I view it is that you essentially take the power of the original nameless Namekian, who he was before he split from Kami and Piccolo, he split into two. And then what happened at that point is their power went way down. So when they merged, when they reunited, their power level returned to that, plus all the power that the two fighters had trained and developed over time. In this case, Piccolo was already a little bit stronger than, maybe a Super Saiyan on Namek, or a little bit weaker, somewhere in that vicinity. And thus, as a result, I would say that you take the Nameless Namekian, who was already compared by Guru to be stronger than Frieza, and maybe, somewhere around the power of a Super Saiyan, combined with the power of Piccolo at that point in time, you add them together, and that's what Piccolo's strength would be. So I could see him being less than twice as strong as Vegeta, but still significantly above him, especially because, remember, Vegeta trained himself to his absolute limits as far as he could possibly go, and then became a Super Saiyan. And again, this isn't Dragon Ball Super where they keep training, and then they get like a million times stronger because they tried and they stubbed their toe one time and they get a Zenkai, No, instead, this is something a little bit different. So they have limits and they're constantly rubbing up against them, and they need a higher form of training, which we'll be getting into shortly as I get into the next part of this. But before we begin, I do want to tell you guys one more time, since I'm going to keep shouting this out during the video, that I do have a new book, which is for the Children of Amon, Nemesis of the Absence, that you could check out in the description, as well as the pinned comment on this video, which goes super far in depth into different powers and cool stories and everything else along the way. So you guys want to help support me and the channel and, get a really great story in your hands, hopefully. If you guys enjoy it, that would be awesome. You guys can check it out down below in the description and pick up a copy today. With that being said, let's get more into the power scaling here. So later on, we get into the explanation how Vegeta says that he wants to go even further beyond, not Super Saiyan 3, he doesn't know that's the thing yet, Super Saiyan, and ascend to a level that nobody else thought was possible, obviously, especially Trunks, because he's dope. But anyway, we do go on to see later, Goku shows up. And here's another thing that a lot of people, they tend to often, especially Goku fans who think he could beat everybody on his own somehow, especially the ones who wrote Sparking Zero, who think that he could beat all the androids and Cell back to back without ever going in the chamber. I don't know what they were smoking when they wrote that. And they animated and programmed that what if. But Goku says that he had heard and sensed everything in his dreams, with his psychic powers they barely ever uses, and that he says that if Vegeta can't beat them right now, then I won't be able to either. Again, this is more proof that Vegeta is stronger than Goku, or at the very least that they're not that far apart. Goku is not stronger than Vegeta in this arc up until the time where he emerges from the chamber. So keep that in mind. And the gap only gets bigger as we go on from here, because the two of them then go on to enter into the chamber in different pairs. We have Vegeta and Trunks who go in first. And then we have the fight between Piccolo and Android 17. So this is where I go on to explain, again, how strong I think that Piccolo really is. Because Android 17 isn't really that much stronger than Android 18. He definitely is stronger. It doesn't matter what the video games or anything else says. Yeah, I always get comments from people saying, what do you mean, Android 18? I thought she was stronger. She had all the same powers and blah, blah, blah. No, they specifically say right here in the manga that Android 18 is weaker than Android 17, and she has been suppressed and her power has been reduced in order to make it to where she is easier to control than Android 17. And so he is the stronger of the two twins in that case. But even despite that, and despite the fact that based on just let's say a power level and power output, I would say that Piccolo is stronger than 17. I don't think that it's by a significant degree that he is stronger. It's more that his energy output is to the degree where he has these giant attacks like the Hell Zone grenade that he uses right here, where he would have theoretically killed 17 if he didn't have his barrier. But not just that, when the two of them are really going all out, 17, starts to fight more hand to hand with Piccolo and starts to truly try as hard as he can. Well, we see that they're not that different in terms of their strength. They seem relatively matched. Piccolo is punching at 17. 17 can dodge his attacks. Piccolo is taking more blows, but at the same time, again, tying into the idea that Dr. Gero didn't necessarily imbue them with the ability to control energy as much as these fighters can, we do have it where his energy output and his punches aren't quite as good as Piccolo's. Piccolo can endure them more easily, but it doesn't really matter because over time we do see that Piccolo, despite the fact that him and 17 can kind of hit each other and, go back and forth and they're relatively even, Piccolo's power is going down over time due to the fact that he does not have infinite stamina just like 17 does. Even though 17 does have some moments where it looks like he might be kind of slightly winded, especially in the anime, that's just sucking air. He still has the same amount of fight in him that he did when he first started, and he could just keep going. He still is a human physically with augmentation, so he might still breathe more, but he could still run infinitely far and everything. It's not like his power is going down or his stamina. Only Piccolo's is going down more and more and more over time, and so it then becomes a question of, could Piccolo have ever actually won here? Personally, I would say that yes, if he used an attack that he uses shortly after this. Again, I would say that because 17 isn't that much stronger than 18, maybe like 20% more to give him the edge, but still not like gigantically different, that would mean that Piccolo is theoretically about, let's say 20 to 50% stronger than Super Saiyan Vegeta would have been, because after all, Vegeta was weaker than 18. So let's say that she was 20% stronger than him. If 17 is 20% stronger than 18, then that would mean that, again, at that point in time, Piccolo would have to be in that range as well, making him somewhere around, 40 to 50% higher than the power of Piccolo, higher than the power of Vegeta, the one who possesses, I'm just going to keep doing this because it's fun, Vegeta's technique. Thank you, Lonely's Archives, for making that joke in the first place. And so we keep saying that in this case, I don't think that Piccolo was several times stronger. And I also think that the kind of idea that a lot of Dragon Ball fans have, that somebody has to be multiple times stronger than somebody to be like incomprehensibly strong and like, oh my God, how is this guy? Oh my Beerus, oh my Kami, how is this guy so much stronger? I can't believe it. It's like, no, Vegeta trained insanely hard to the point to where like he couldn't even believe it anymore, that he like only broke his wall and his limits after training 300 times gravity for 3 freaking years and pushing himself to near death constantly. He only finally broke through everything by snapping and going Super Saiyan, and then Piccolo and the androids are stronger. Of course, that's like unbelievable to him and shatters his pride. It doesn't mean like that they're 10 times stronger than him or whatever have you. It just means that somebody is stronger than, like, imagine if you work your whole life and you bench 500 pounds and then some big dude walks up and benches 6, like my brain blew up. That's basically what's happening there. That's, again, why I tend to often lean more in like the direction of like being a little bit more conservative with my power scaling. I'm from the school of space Austrian economics, but either way, Cell shows up, and he at this point can just wreck both of them. He powers up. In the anime, we have that awesome scene where he has the flaming aura with like the skulls, the ghosts coming out of it, the ghouls. Oh, spooky, like Halloween coming up. And he basically looks like a Super Saiyan here with his aura. So you could argue that Cell basically achieved his Super Saiyan genes or whatever. I don't think he got 50 times stronger, but he got so much more powerful that Piccolo is like shaking in his little hobo shoes, whatever he's wearing, his little boots. And at this point, he goes on and he's just so much stronger than Android 17, and he's just wrecking him. And Piccolo can hit him again when he's caught off guard, and even seemingly draw blood. He is wiping his face, which usually is an indicator of that. But even then, it's irrelevant, because what do we see right here? Piccolo goes to charge up the attack that I think he could have beaten Android 17 with, even with his barrier, which is the light grenade. We have the Hell Zone grenade with the little mini attacks that went from him at all angles and would have killed 17 without the barrier. And then we have the Hell Zone grenade. This is basically Piccolo dumping as much energy as he can into a single attack, a concentrated one, so he doesn't just blow up the planet and like, Mars and Venus and everything else at the same time, whatever, depends on, I guess, the solar alignment, whatever. And fires it right here. Awesome attack. And we see that 17 jumps out of the way. So this again tells me that Piccolo, even if he has like an equivalent power level, even with like normal strikes and such that 17 would have, with his, short burst ability, that his firing output with his big, strong energy blasts is greater than whatever 17 can defend, including with his force field. I'd say that 17's force field is probably around the regular durability of 17, maybe a little bit higher. It's just that he outputs it to a degree to where he will take 0 damage if you can't break through it. And we saw in the Tournament of Power, if you want to include super scaling in your own larger power scaling, if you disagree with me about the fact that they don't add up and line up necessarily and say that, somebody could just punch through it if they're strong enough. And in this case, I would agree because he jumped instead of using the power shield. Even Bobbity in the next arc uses his barrier when Boo blows himself up. That's a whole other thing. He uses the barrier at different points, right? So either way, this shows that Cell is so much above Piccolo and 17. Again, if Piccolo fired a full power blast at the very start of the fight, you kind of wonder if maybe it actually would have done something to Cell here. But the fact that Cell takes 0 damage, that shows to me that he's way more than just like 20% higher than Piccolo here. So that becomes a question of just how strong actually is Cell then? Did Cell become twice as strong as Piccolo? According to one of the Daizenshus, for instance, if you want to count guides in your particular power scaling, if I remember correctly, it says something along the lines of how you need to be about twice as strong as your opponent to completely tank with 0 damage or effort somebody's attacks or blasts. You could argue that, but I don't think that, again, it would necessarily make the most sense for Cell to have absorbed like another city or two and is suddenly stronger by twice as much as Piccolo and 17. So that comes down to your own scaling. Does Cell have a power level now of like 500 million, 600, 700, like 2 billion, whatever you want to scale at this point? I think that this is where things start to become a little bit trickier if you want to actually use numbers, because then of course, not only is he way stronger than 17 and Piccolo and can wreck them when they have like high 300 millions power level, but then he absorbs the other androids into him. So we could argue perhaps that upper hundreds of millions for Cell in his power level right now, at least mid power levels, depending upon what you would equate that to, and fatigue levels of Piccolo with the blast and so on. But Android 16 shows up, and 16, according to his own words that he had just told to 18, is equal in power to Cell. And he shows this. He is going back and forth with Cell, catches him off guard, but then the two of them, they're headbutting each other, they're pushing back and forth. Cell tries to absorb him, but obviously he can't because 16 is entirely mechanical. Aside from maybe his skin, you could argue that it's like a T-800 where he has living tissue over a metal endoskeleton. But either way, 16 actually gets the better of Cell, where he's able to rip his tail off. And then Cell uses regeneration, which would get rid of a little bit of energy, but he says it's barely anything because it's just his tail. He is part lizard after all, right? So we see Cell actually looks like he powers up even more. He wasn't going full power and taking everything totally seriously. And then he starts to dodge more, hit more to 16. But again, 16 gets the advantage. Going back to that, we see 16 bleeding from his lip. So once again, I kind of view it as basically he's like a T-800 with even more power, which is hard. He's stronger than Arnold already based on him, right? And then he's able to, again, get the better of Cell with his attacks, slam him down into the ground and blast him. So I think that personally, 16 would have been able to beat Cell if the fight dragged on. Cell might have better techniques, but the power of 16 is like the others of 17 and 18. He has infinite energy, which we were told when he first showed up in the story a couple parts ago. When he first emerges, 18 is looking over at him. When they are in the Dr. Gero's laboratory, which you'll see very shortly. And she says, is this also an infinite energy model? And of course, that is the implication that 16 himself is in fact an infinite energy model. So I think that 16 would have won if he continued to fight against Cell, but 17 was stupid, like most Dragon Ball villains. And he's like, oh, that's fine. We'll be fine. Don't worry about it. And so 17 came up, or Cell came up behind him, absorbed him, and added his power to himself and got unlimited power. Well, not really, because then he gets wrecked by Vegeta. But this is where he becomes semi-perfect Cell, kind of halfway to perfect and halfway to not. And this is where his power goes, again, way higher. So the first thing that they notice is that his speed has gone up significantly. It's almost like 17 gave him more speed than anything else, which he mentions right here. He's way more impressed with his speed than anything. In the middle of a sentence, 16 punches him in the face and it does nothing. Normally, as we've seen many times here, it would do something. But instead, it does nothing, which shows just how big of a difference here there is. Because after all, remember, just before we saw that 17 and Piccolo were fighting, and that both of them were getting wrecked by Cell, and guess what? Piccolo fired this full power attack right at Cell's face, right at his body, and it did nothing to him. And then 16 can fight against Cell and have the better of him. But then 16 punches him probably as hard as he can right in the face when he's not even paying attention, and it does nothing. So that goes to show you just how big of a difference there is between the two characters. I would say that this Cell is at least probably twice as strong as Piccolo and 17 were. And thus, as a result, he blasts him and he's able to easily have him defeated. He's not really even going all out until Vegeta shows up in a little bit. Now, when it comes to Cell's absorption, I don't think it's really just addition of the powers. I don't think this is Cell who just is plus 350, 375 million, whatever you want to say that 17 is. Instead, I would argue that his body not only adds the power, but then it reconfigures itself in the way that is the most beneficial in order to use that power, which is even better. It's like if you had all the strength of Arnold Schwarzenegger in your body, but then your body is like a scrawny, girly man, like he would say. Well, then suddenly you reconfigure your body and your power level to being where you are able to then in turn use it far greater than you were able to before. So that's what I think happened with Cell right here. Cell is way stronger than if he had just added 17 to his body. So I would say that he gets an even bigger boost than that. And so he's probably upper millions, upper hundreds of millions now, maybe even low billions. It depends on how you scale this story. But we see something else that happens here that kind of defies logic, right? Because after all, we just saw that 16 punched Cell in the face and it did nothing. Well, Tien says, screw power levels and screw you, Shin Kikoho. And, he turns a triangle into a square. And then what happens? He keeps blasting him and he is holding Cell down. Cell actually is screaming in pain. He is taking damage. This is not just a guy who's like, oh, well, I'm just going to like play around and have fun and, slightly gently be pushed down to the ground. No. Tien blasts him over and over and over and over again. And he has scuffs and burns all over him. You could see right here, he is superficially damaged. So again, that tells us that Tien with the Shinki Koho was dealing so much damage to Cell that it was more than a punch in the face from 16 when he wasn't paying attention, which is higher than anything Piccolo could do with his Hellzone grenade, which could have theoretically killed Android 17, which means that, theoretically, if Tien was an idiot, he could have just killed the androids and this never would have happened. Very smart, Tien. Very smart. But at least Toriyama gave him his cool moment. And then he, face planted in the freaking ground. I mean, damn, Tien. It's better than what you do in Super. Also, Piccolo has way better regeneration now, apparently. But either way, Cell, well, he kind of is hanging out for now, trying to blow up some islands. Piccolo is also going to hang out too. But we see that Goku and Gohan are going to enter into the time chamber, and Vegeta and Torankasu, now they're getting ready to fight after they emerged from the chamber themselves with an even higher power level than before. So how strong are these two fighters then? Well, we're going to see right here when Vegeta shows up, ready to fight against semi-perfect Cell. Now, when he shows up to the battle, what do we see? Now, in terms of his power level here, it's definitely going to be higher in his regular Super Saiyan grade 1 form. This is where we start to get into the grades, the higher grades of Super Saiyan. So the initial legendary Super Saiyan, and no, not Broly's, is grade 1 at this point. The basic Super Saiyan. Now, notice how when he goes to fight against Cell, we are told that Vegeta, his strength has risen since 18 last fought him. So you could argue that Vegeta right now might be stronger without even going grade 2 than 18, maybe even 17. There's an argument that he might be able to defeat him, but at the same time, Vegeta didn't really know how strong Cell would become. He was kind of using him as sort of as a benchmark, as well as Piccolo again. This is why the characters start to get even stronger, because whereas before, they were training for some ambiguous level of power that they could not sense, 17 and 18. But at this point in time, well, instead, now they actually can feel the power, like the New Day, of Cell. And Vegeta did fight against 18 at least. And, he is a fighting genius, as Piccolo pointed out earlier. And as a result, he is in turn able to get stronger and surpass even what Cell is capable of through the advanced training of the hyperbolic time chamber. Because he trained for 3 years in 100 times gravity, which is higher than the time chamber, but he didn't train with that in mind, and he also didn't train with the other rigors, the constant struggle that Vegeta has to be just living in that time chamber with his son for all that time. Now, a lot of people say that Vegeta and Trunks did not train together at all. I still don't really agree, because after all, when they first leave the chamber, Trunks does say something, which is with regard to all of that, and saying that, explain just how fast it was that Vegeta first was able to surpass the Super Saiyan wall. It only took 2 months for him to do it, by the way. But then he decided to keep going because he wasn't satisfied with its power and trained some more. So Trunks, I doubt, was just watching. I mean, after all, Vegeta knows how strong Trunks is too and everything. They probably had a little bit of sparring over time. That would also explain why their clothes are all messed up. So I don't think that Trunks literally just stood there and watched Vegeta the whole time like a lot of people in the fandom seem to think. And again, the super flashbacks indicate. I think that they actually did. It's just that Vegeta is so prideful, he kept it secret, and Trunks was able to develop his other form, grade 3, mentally in his mind, kind of like what we see Goku doing in this fight, in the fight against Trunks and Cell afterward. So you could argue that Vegeta right now is stronger than 17 and 18, at least stronger than 18, maybe. But when he goes and powers up to his next form, well, this is when it's absolutely clear that that's the case. Because, I'll get into the stuff with Goku and Gohan soon, but because the fact that everybody's not only shocked by the fact that he's still getting stronger and more maximumer than ever, but then we could see well, he taps into a new form on top of everything, and furthermore, that he's able to deal some significant damage immediately to Cell. Punching him, taking him off guard. This art is so awesome, Toriyama, rest in peace. And yeah, just wrecking him very easily, drawing blood, breaking through his defenses, and Vegeta isn't even going all out. Vegeta allows him eventually to do the same thing that he did with Android 19. We see that Cell powers up even further. He goes full power because he wasn't really trying up until right now. And then it's kind of funny. We basically have the same thing that happens later on with Gohan in Cell. Toriyama borrowed from this scene. He's like, oh, is that all you have? Your power has gone up tremendously. So again, you could argue that if we're just going by power levels and stuff, that Cell might already be over 1 billion right now. But that means that Vegeta would have to be too. So again, these numbers, well, in many ways, they're kind of ambiguous. He lets him punch him in the face. Oh, is that the best you got? He's smiling. It's almost kind of like also what happened with Vegeta or with Goku on Namek. Goku allowed Frieza to blast him in the face, and he's like, oh, well, I won't even block. Why don't you blast me and see what you can do? And then he drew blood. Same thing here, low bloody lip. And he's like, oh, well, it's so much easier for you to destroy a planet than one man, isn't it? You know? But at this point, how much stronger is Vegeta actually? Now, a lot of people over the years have tried to give power levels in terms of multipliers to the grades, but I think that that's slightly misguided here. I think that this grade, as well as the other grades, actually take into account the same idea as the short bursts and using more energy and power, but instead of actually doing it in the sense of like a single punch or a single strike or something, a single blast, instead they take the energy that they would be using in order to fire a super powerful blast, in order to do a punch at a higher power level than Vegeta's 250 million, or in this case 300, 350, whatever have you. Instead, they put it directly into their body and their muscles. That's why Vegeta is so much more jacked now. It isn't just that he's like, oh, he's in a stronger body. No, it's that they actually are inflating their muscles with their energy there. And I believe actually one of the Daizenshu's, the Super Saiyan guys, actually says this too, which is something that I would kind of agree with. Their excess energy is something that they're pouring into their muscles in order to make them physically stronger on top of everything else. Notice also again how Trunks had said that Vegeta achieved this form after being in the time chamber for 2 months, but he wasn't satisfied with its power. That goes again to show you that he was able to do this already within 1/6 of the amount of time that he spent in the chamber. You could argue that they were actually in the chamber longer than a day, based upon some of the little annoyances that Goku has earlier on, the statements and so on. So with the case of Vegeta, Super Vegeta, as he calls himself, grade 2, I think that that's one of the biggest reasons. Vegeta, unlike Trunks, realized the limitations of this in the grade 3 form, insofar as the fact that the Ascended Saiyan and the Ultra Saiyan, as they call them in the fandom up until the grades became more widely known, they make you slower comparative to the power that you're inputting into your mass. So that's probably what Vegeta started to realize. He wasn't satisfied because he probably realized, wait, I'm stronger physically, but I'm slower now physically too. So he had to account for that in order to then in turn be able to get the power that he truly wanted to reach. And so that he would be able to dodge these attacks by Cell and actually hit him. So that's what I think is going on here. Vegeta is putting his energy into his muscles and making himself stronger, but it isn't just like a multiplier. It's not like he's 1.7 times stronger or 1.25 times or 1.5 times stronger than he was as Super Saiyan grade 1. He's actually he could potentially be way stronger than that. He can make himself 10 times, who knows how many more times, entirely based upon all of the additional energy that he's putting into his body and his muscles at the same time. It's all about stamina right now. That's like a major thing in this arc that I think a lot of people either overlook or they get so caught up in the numbers and the strength that they don't understand that stamina is such a gigantic thing in this arc. That's the reason why 18 broke Vegeta's arms. It wasn't because she was so much stronger. It's because she had infinite stamina. That's why they were such a big deal. They could not only outlast the fighters, they were not only so strong, but then they would outlast them. You see what I'm saying? And so as a result, that's what's happening with Vegeta. He, instead of focusing on his stamina, is instead saying, well, if I just put all my stamina, the energy that I would reserve into my physical body, and thus in turn I would be able to destroy my opponent. And he is correct, at least at first, because that is what happens here. And so that is why Vegeta gets more muscular. All the energy that would be in short bursts is constantly pumping into his muscles. Now I jump forward way too much, so let's keep going. But that's what happens. He's way more powerful than Semi-Perfect Cell, but then Semi-Perfect Cell is also weaker than Trunks, who at this point in time is weaker than Vegeta. Vegeta actually points this out, in fact, too. At one point in time, he's like, "Oh, I'll show you right now." It's a great scene that I actually really enjoy. He says, "Now let me tell you something. Over there's this man named Trunks, and he's almost as strong as me." This is another point of contention because there's so much ambiguity after Namek, right, guys? And so what happens? Trunks is weaker than Vegeta right now. I would agree with that, but he's also stronger than Cell. However, at this point, what happens? Cell absorbs Android 18. And when he does, he starts to become perfect. Now, Trunks goes to attack Cell. However, he can't even hit through him. You would argue that Vegeta would just be like crapping in his like spandex right now because, wait, my son, who's almost as strong as me, can't even like get through this dude's beard. Oh crap, I'm gonna die. You know, like you'd think that he'd crap himself, but it's not really the case because there is one thing I did a whole video about. And again, referencing Broly, I don't know why I'm doing that so much in this video, but referencing Broly, it's kind of like when Vegeta attacked Broly when he was finally unleashing his power. When a character, and like I said, I did a whole video about this called "Why Don't Dragon Ball Z Characters Attack When the Enemy is Transforming?" When they're transforming, there is a temporary boost that a character will get. You could see it. This is happening. There is like a temporary force field that will enshroud them and stop them from being hurt. We see this happening here. This isn't like Android 17's barrier. It looks similar because of the coloration, but in fact, like I said before, that's typically around the power of whoever is putting out. Instead, what's really happening here is that, and you can see it bursting forth it's not, again, 17's barrier. It's bursting in a way that his doesn't. When you transform, and Goku actually explains this later on when he comes out of the chamber, your body fires off a lot of energy and you waste a lot of stamina because of that. And so when your body emits all of that, it's like a force field that's even greater than your typical energy that you're draped within, that we see the force field around the characters all the time. It's like a giant explosion, but you waste like 50% of your energy, 20%, a massive amount that goes into your stamina. And because you have less energy on hand, on reserve, you can't punch as hard as you could be, as often as you could before. You can't fire a blast that would use all of your energy if you didn't waste all of it comparative to however much energy that you have on hand. And thus, as a result, you're limiting yourself. And thus, as a result, you are then in turn weakening the final output. And so that's what's happening right here with Cell when he is actually going and he is transforming. He is bursting forth with excess energy that's firing forth from him as his body's undergoing this metamorphosis. And so it cannot be broken through. Same thing happens, like I mentioned, with Broly and every other character. They get a temporary sort of boost to their defenses, almost like Mario eating the star. I mean, does he eat them? Where does he put that in his body? Anyway, he shoves it where the sun doesn't shine, unless it's in sunshine. And, and then he becomes perfect. Now, this entire time we do see Gohan is compared alongside Cell. This is some great visual storytelling that's not really as emphasized in the anime version, but we see that, for instance, when Cell powered up against Vegeta. Vegeta's winning. What's happening right there? Well, he powers up, but then he fails to actually be able to do anything. Just like Gohan powers up trying to become a Super Saiyan, and he in turn fails to do it. Then Cell becomes perfect and powers up to his strongest form yet. And Gohan, well, he becomes a Super Saiyan. Great storytelling by Toriyama that's really overlooked by people who don't use their visual literacy with regard to this, because it's masterful storytelling. Just visuals alone. You could cut out everything that's being said and just show the images side by side, and how excellently done it is. I mean, you even have the same framing. You have Cell hunched over on the right side of the screen, looking toward the left side of the screen, and you have Gohan hunched over, and he's looking toward the left side of the screen, and he's powering up again. Same thing like the one I showed you before. It's almost mirrored. Toriyama is setting up to fight the entire arc between Gohan and Cell, and it's really showing here. Now, I'll get into that before. I'm talking about that for a purpose, not just because I have ADHD, but also because the fact that we have Cell become perfect. This is his biggest boost yet. It isn't just a matter of he is adding 18 to himself. Again, he reconfigures his body in the most perfect way possible. Play Cell Saga theme here, Mike. You're not going to do that because you're not editing this video. But anyway, future Mike. And so he gets way more powerful than that. So much more powerful that he just can annihilate everyone. He could blow up a planet. Like, this is the thing. Cell won already. This is his victory. He can win right now. He just blows up the planet. The end. That's the end of the arc. Goku and Gohan are stuck in the chamber. It's over. He wins. Even if they both come out together, he would kill them both if he actually went full power and didn't play around. Instead, he doesn't, because the fact that, well, he wants to test himself now. He is part Goku just as much as he's part Vegeta and part Frieza. A lot of people say he becomes generic now and blah, blah, blah. A lot of people don't understand Cell's character, which explains that statement. But you know, in the anime version too, Krillin throws the Kienzan Destructo Disc at him and it does nothing. Or you could argue it actually cuts off his head and his regeneration is so fast that he just makes it seem like it doesn't. And then in his head he's screaming because, oh my God, that hurts so bad. But I don't think so. Either way, he wants to test himself. He hits Krillin, and Krillin, and also despite the fact that Toriyama drew this way, Cell is not like 20 feet tall and way bigger than all the other ones, as perfect. But Krillin points out just how much stronger Cell is than Vegeta, and that Vegeta is just going to get killed because Cell is so much stronger. And we see this. Vegeta, he tries right here against Cell. He's actually fighting him at full power, and Vegeta points out as Cell is just sparring with him playing that you're not even taking this seriously. At first, we have 16 thinking with his like power scouter in his head, his power levels, you know, that he can scout, like, you know, power scalers all there who just like stick to those static numbers that don't actually exist except for on forums, you know, after Namek, that they're still relatively equal, but Vegeta's still stronger. And it's like, no, Cell isn't even trying, not even remotely. I'd say Cell here is maybe using like 20% of his power, if that, because of just how insanely big of a boost he got. He went probably from like maybe upper hundreds of millions. Like if we say that semi-perfect Cell is like 750 million to 1.25 billion, I would say that this Cell is, I don't know, 5 times stronger than that maybe, you know, but we'll get into that a little bit more as the story goes on. But we see that he's so much more powerful. Vegeta hits him at full power while Cell doesn't even block, and it does nothing. Again, that indicates to us that he's at least twice as strong as Vegeta, and he's not even full power. He doesn't have his aura draping him. It's insane how big of a boost it is here. So Vegeta can't even output enough power into his muscles to do anything. And so that's when Vegeta is just getting annihilated by Cell. And then he goes on to use the Final Flash. Now, a lot of people think that if Cell didn't, I don't know, slightly move at the last second, or that if Vegeta didn't narrow the beam, he would have killed Cell. I don't think so, because remember later on when Goku fights against Cell, he fires a strong, way more powerful attack than the Final Flash because his power level is way higher than Vegeta's, and it still does not kill him. It just blows up part of his body, is the top half. In this case, a little chunk out of him. So obviously it was enough to bypass Cell's passive defenses, where he's bracing himself but not imbuing himself with his aura, not surrounded by his force field, but it is not enough to kill him. If Cell went full power, he could just finger flick the final flash away. I mean, it would have been like what we saw in the anime version with the Cell Juniors, when even stronger Vegeta fires final flash and they just kind of grab it and throw it and it blows up a mountain, even though obviously it would do way more than that. But, intention, whatever. Either way, it would have been nothing. It would have been Frieza kicking away the blast all over again. The final flash would do nothing if Cell went full power, or even close to that, to be honest, the power that he uses later on. So this shows just how much stronger Cell has become, but we get to go on later because Trunks, Todonkasu, finally steps up with the power that is supposedly stronger than his father. Krillin pointed that out before, saying that I know that you're holding back too. And then he goes into his next grade, grade 3, or Ultra Super Saiyan, as the fans like to call it for many years. He purposely waited until Vegeta was knocked out, because that's Vegeta's true technique, which is failing. Play the Yu Yu Hakusho sad music. And actually, as a matter of fact, Vegeta did use a very powerful ability way before he used the Final Flash, which is probably the only reason why he wouldn't have been able to win, which is right about here when he's firing it at Cell. Now I can't find it. So you'll just have to imagine him using Vegeta's technique. But here it is actually right here. Jeez. I'm already retconning myself. And Cell just kind of just like he does in the Cell games, he just steps right through it and punches him in the face. I love it. The technique that never works. And I have a whole video about how it works and why it doesn't. So Cell powers up Trunks powers up and Cell is shocked. You could argue that Cell powers up a little bit too. He even points out, wow, he's very strong. He's got a lot of hidden power. And the two of them step up to each other, just like Jotaro and Dio, except, one of them doesn't have Zawardo and one of them doesn't have Star Platinum. And they begin to fight. And, we see that Trunks is taking some shots from Cell, but when he really starts to go all out, it isn't really doing that much in terms of damage. However, this is where things are a little bit different, because in the manga version, things play out a lot, more one-sided in Cell's favor here. You see, because at this point in time, in the anime, we had seen Trunks already hitting Cell, knocking him down, that amazing animation, all the music, everything was done incredibly well. In the manga, however, Cell points out how power isn't everything, and he even says that Trunks has far greater strength than his. I'll get back to that in a moment. And when that happens, we see that additionally, Trunks in the manga version is not even able to hit Cell at all, because the fact that, like I just said before, when a character bulks up as much as him, it has an inversely proportional impact on their speed. And so, as a result, because of that, Trunks does not realize his own flaw and thus cannot even deal the lethal damage that Cell implies he might be able to. Instead, Cell shows him the error of his ways, another amazing scene, because how often do we see a villain showing the protagonist at the time, oh, you're like a fool who can't even hit me, and I'm going to teach you why? Instead, it's usually the other way around. It's like Goku chastising Frieza for not knowing how to use his power and everything like that, right? And so, in this case, we actually have Goku explain this to the audience, because Goku's way more of a genius. Goku goes into not only Super Saiyan Grade 2, which he materialized in his brain with, his meditation, something that for some reason he forgot exists in Dragon Ball Super Superhero. And then he goes not only that, but even further beyond. I'll advance it even further too. And this must be where he got Super Saiyan 3. And bulks up his muscles even more to the exact same form that Trunks is using, but he then mentions the same thing that Trunks had already figured out by fighting, which is, it makes me stronger, it makes me slower as well. If I'm stronger than him, I should be able to hit him as well. And then he says, it wastes my energy. All in all, the regular Super Saiyan is more balanced in that they'll have to get back to fundamentals and they'll have to make Super Saiyan their normal state. And at that point in time, get rid of the restless feeling and reduce all the stamina drain, everything like that, which is the direction they go in with the mastered Super Saiyan. Whereas Trunks is too much of a dope. And as a result, that is why Cell shows him, because, you know, he's teaching him as his daddy should, because he is part of his daddy. He is part Trunks' daddy. And what does he do? He wags that finger at him because he proves to him that, well, it won't matter because this form is stupid. It's worthless because all it is brute strength. It just wastes their energy by putting all of their energy into their muscles, and it makes them slower. Because after all, I know a lot of people also would be like, well, I mean, that means that the Dragon Ball characters are weak, right? Because, like, I mean, they're only like, what, 50 pounds heavier with muscles. I mean, they might be like synthol muscles where they're just pure water weight or energy weight, which shouldn't really make them heavier at all, and blah, blah, blah. Not really, because when a character is that powerful in which they are able to, you know, for instance, they're so fast, they're putting so much energy into their speed, just adding additional weight on top of that makes it so much more energy consuming. They have to put in so much more power to adjust for every single calculation. That's part of the reason probably why they also stopped using the weighted clothing. Goku stops after the Saiyan saga, for instance, when he's on Namek, and they fight because the fact that, you know, in order to punch with this much force and velocity, you have to also account for the additional energy that will go into calculating on top of the 20 pounds that you might have on your arm at the time, or on your legs. Like, if your entire body, when a character in Dragon Ball Z is moving around, let me do a fuller picture for this. I would actually stand up and everything, but, you know, camera angles and stuff. When you're doing like, when you're fighting in Dragon Ball Z, you know, like, you're pushing yourself with your energy in different directions, like short burst, moving you to the left, short burst, moving you to the right, moving you up in the air, moving you back, moving you forward, burst of energy, and constantly doing that like a million times per second because of how fast they become. Imagine doing that constantly while also having twice the body mass that you just had before. Immensely more difficult, even though, you know, like, oh, well, Superman could lift up the planet with one finger. It's like, yeah, but he's not putting a planet on himself like armor and like trying to move around at the same, you know, it's like totally different situation, which is why I think that's kind of a false equivalency that a lot of people use in the fandom, where it's like, oh, it doesn't make sense for it to slow them down. Actually, it does, because of how complicated it is for these characters to do literally anything when they move and fight that, you know, nobody thinks about it. It's like, oh, it's Dragon Ball Z, you're not supposed to think this hard into it. I mean, if you've seen my channel once in your entire lifetime, you know that I think even further beyond. Yeah. I think too much, yeah. Anyway, the point is that Trunks, he realizes how dumb he is. And not just that, but additionally, another thing worth pointing out is that Trunks realizes that Vegeta already figured all this out way before he did too. Just like Goku figured it out when he hasn't even used the form to punch one time yet. He figured it out immediately that it is worthless because of how bulky it is. This means that Vegeta already figured out this move, which in turn means that Vegeta probably was still stronger than Trunks the entire time, and Trunks is just dumb, and he thought that he was stronger than his dad, but he was actually weaker the whole time. Or at the very least, if Trunks was stronger, he just was only ever so slightly stronger in his other forms and just held back slightly. But even then, I don't think so. I think that Vegeta was either the same level of power as Trunks the whole time, or he was stronger than his son, and that he gets stronger than his son after this as well when they enter into the time chamber. Trunks just thought, oh, my britches are so big. My dad ain't shit compared to me. I'd beat his ass any day of the week. You know, he's only 5'2", and I'm like, I don't know, 5'9", whenever Trunks is supposed to be, you know, and that height probably got stunted a little bit being in the time chamber too. But either way, it's like, no, Trunks, no, oh, Baka Trunks. Baka, being full on weeb right now. You're just a dumbass, and you never would have been able to beat your dad because you're so stupid. You would go into that form, and then he would just whoop your ass. So yeah, he would get the belt on you. He'd regrow his tail just to like rip it off and start whipping you with it, just like or he would get the sandal depending upon he get the chancleta or whatever they would call it, right? He would pray the pimp's prayer and slap you like Cat Williams in the Boondocks. So yeah, either way, when it comes to the strength, the whole idea is Trunks actually stronger than Cell, like he says right here? I don't think so. I think that's Cell kind of like hyping him up in terms of his physical strength, but it doesn't matter because Cell has everything else in abundance over Trunks, and Cell is also suppressed here. And Cell can literally do the exact same thing that Trunks does, which means that he's not stronger than him. Trunks obviously would not be physically stronger than Cell right here when he's twice the size of Trunks when Trunks was twice the size of Trunks. You see what I'm saying? So either way, Cell is just like he just obliterates everybody at this point in the story. Even Goku and Gohan, when they step out of the chamber, are no match for Cell if he goes full power, which we see right here when the two of them emerge. Now, at this point in time, we actually get power estimates. Nobody can sense their energy because they're able to just kind of like walk around in their normal form. With Super Saiyan as their normal form. They're not wasting any more stamina at all. That's why they stay in the form the whole time. I think in the manga version, there is a very slight difference with the anime, where in the manga, if I remember correctly, they do actually mention that they do not stay in the form when they're sleeping. I think that Gohan might mention that to Dende, but in the anime, of course, we see the infamous scene, where Krillin throws a rock at Goku's head and hurts him. That wouldn't happen in Toriyama's manga. But either way, we see that Goku has Korin measure his power comparative to Cell's. Even though Cell has been holding back the entire time and Korin doesn't know for a fact how strong Cell is, Goku wants to know if Korin can tell him if Goku stands any chance. And so he goes and powers up. At this point, his power, about half his full power, is already stronger than Vegeta and Trunks and Piccolo, everybody there. This shows that Goku and Gohan together got a huge boost because they're already weaker than Piccolo and Vegeta when they went to the chamber. Gohan didn't even have Super Saiyan yet. And by the end, they have mastered Super Saiyan. They have increased their, now it's grade 4, as they call full power Super Saiyan. And not just that, but they've additionally made it to where they are stronger in their base form, which I'm going to get into soon than everybody else. So the Super Saiyans at least. But despite that being half his power, Korin says Cell is still stronger. He says a bit, but to be honest, it's way more than a bit as far as I'm concerned when we get to the fight. And I'm going to use that because I could just throw out the estimates here and there, but I think it's better to show you, which is what I do typically in these videos, because I think that all the context is the most important. Otherwise, I wouldn't be talking for hours about the Cell Saga again, right? But either way, Goku is fine because he knows that Gohan is already stronger. So this is where a lot of people start to completely just misunderstand a lot of this stuff right here. Now, let's get into a couple of things here. A lot of people think that Vegeta's base form is stronger than Goku and Gohan's, and that Goku and Gohan are actually only stronger than Vegeta because the fact that they have a higher grade of Super Saiyan, and that normally without that higher grade of Super Saiyan, they would be individually weaker than him because he's strong, he trained harder and blah, 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 blah. That's wrong. As Arnold Schwarzenegger would say, since I'm referencing him so often in the arc that references him constantly, bullshit. It's bullshit. Because no, Goku and Gohan's base form is stronger than Vegeta and Trunks by a significant margin. As a matter of fact, I'm going to say something else from my own perspective of the power scale that I think also will make a lot of people disagree. Full power grade 4 Super Saiyan is not stronger than the initial grade 1 Super Saiyan. And as a matter of fact, it is the exact same multiplier. If anything, it's a lower multiplier because they go lower constantly through suppression than the other forms do. I mean, just look at this. Do you think that, for example, when we look later on, we see Goku and Gohan, everybody chilling and having a picnic and stuff like that, and having fun, that they are going to be stronger in this form that they're hanging around in, that grade 2 and grade 3 with their gigantic muscles are? Do you think that Vegeta and Trunks can sit down without blowing up this entire area just by sitting on the floor like World War Hulk, destroying the Eastern Seaboard with a couple steps just because, like, you know, their form is a lower multiplier? No, that's nonsense. I think that the reality is that Goku and Gohan have the same power, the same multiplier, if you want to even say that those exist, that the initial Super Saiyan had, and their base form is insanely higher than it was when they went in. And not just that, but additionally, that also their ability to control and keep that energy in their body, as I mentioned before when talking about the other grades, is also itself greater. They do not waste an insane amount of energy when they transform into Super Saiyan anymore. Instead, they reserve all of that for the energy they have on hand when they battle. That's the reason why they can go to such higher levels of power than Vegeta and Trunks can. I mean, look at this right here. They're Super Saiyans, but they seem to stay normal or super even under normal circumstances. And what does Trunks say? But when they fight, will they become stronger? This is actually a bad translation. In fact, Trunks is saying that, so will they get an even stronger form when they fight? Will they, will they have some other bulky thing? Basically, he's thinking the same way he did before because, he's stupid Trunks. But in this case, Vegeta is like, no, you fool, think about it. That if he gets used to this form, when he increases his energy, the strain in his body won't be so heavy. Essentially, they're all saying the same thing. That when these two characters are walking around normally as Super Saiyans when they transform, because they could transform at such a lower level of energy, because they're wasting very significantly less energy, because their mind does not have that restless feeling inside of them anymore that's forcing them to constantly not hold back to the degree that they can, then in turn, because they are normal now, because they're basically just a little bit above their base forms when they're walking around casually, and that's why nobody can sense them, that they do not waste the gigantic 30-50% of their energy that they would output when they explode with their power outward when they first transform into the ability, which thus in turn makes it to where they are stronger than if they had just gone regular Super Saiyan. That is not a higher multiplier. It is conserving more energy, and also they are stronger physically because they train together with Goku and Gohan far more efficiently and far better than Vegeta and Trunks did. Like I said before, a lot of people don't think that Vegeta and Trunks sparred together at all. Maybe they didn't, but even if they did, it doesn't matter because Goku and Gohan got a way better benefit and advantage. That's why over time people have said, oh, well, Goku was held back by Gohan the whole time. If Goku had just gone in with Vegeta or Trunks, he'd be stronger. He'd be able to beat Cell. Again, wrong. Objectively wrong. And we could see why earlier on in the arc when the two of them step into that time chamber together. We see Goku talks about this actually. Gohan says, essentially like, oh, am I going to hold you back at all when you are training together? And he's like, well, only at first, but after you become a Super Saiyan, you'll help a lot in my training. That's his plan. He wants to overcome the limits of a Super Saiyan, become even stronger than everyone else, but he wants for Gohan to become stronger than him because he knows that Gohan deep down has far more potential and energy inside of him than Goku ever will be able to. That's Gohan's entire character that's been built up since the very first time he was introduced in the story. Goku knew he had the energy. Chi-Chi wouldn't let him train. He's the one who was able to damage Raditz enough to beat him. He's the one who pushed back Frieza's transformations time and time again while Goku needed gigantic Zenkai boosts, blah, 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 blah. He's the one who gets built up to be able to defeat the ultimate character, the ultimate villain that Goku does not stand any chance against because the fact that Goku was not as superior in terms of physicality and energy and everything as Gohan or Cell, only Gohan is able to win. That's the entire point of the arc. So the whole time that they're getting stronger, when Goku has Gohan become a Super Saiyan, he starts pushing Goku far further than anyone else would have been able to when they're sparring, pushing him further and further and further. And the anime actually does a great job of showing this, because in the anime, Gohan goes Super Saiyan Super Saiyan 2 for the very first time in the chamber after he's pushed Goku to the point where Goku's like, oh, let's stop for today. This is too much. And then Goku's like, no, I can keep going. And then he goes Super Saiyan 2 for an instant before he passes out. So that's why Goku knows for a fact that Gohan is already stronger than he is, which he confirms later on when the Cell games actually happens. And additionally, that he can do what Goku could never do. Goku could go back in that chamber and he would fail because he is not strong enough to win, no matter what he does. It took him 7 years of training just to surpass Gohan, because Gohan is that much of a beast when he actually transforms. And I'm not even talking about superhero. Ha 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 ha. Roll on snare drum, but no. But, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Let's talk about the power of the other characters again, too. Let's talk about, for instance, when everybody is in the time chamber, or post-time chamber, getting ready to fight. So, for instance, we have Vegeta. Vegeta went into the time chamber for one more day. And when he did, he got stronger than he went in. Theoretically, he would have surpassed Goku's 50% power. Because after all, that's what he sensed Goku's power as being when he went into that chamber. He was, sensing his energy, and he's like, oh, I'm going to surpass Kakarot. He thought that was Goku's full power, which he keeps thinking until a little bit later on. However, with that being said, Piccolo went into the chamber too. Now remember, Piccolo was already stronger than Goku and Vegeta when when they went in their first times. So Piccolo comes out, and I would say that he got stronger than Trunks and Vegeta after their first time as well. I mean, after all, look at what happens here. Goku mentions when he sees Piccolo after the chamber that you got way more powerful than you were before. A lot more powerful. Then Piccolo's like, yeah, now tell me what you're really here for. You're going to say that even though my power has risen, I still can't beat Cell. And then what does it say? Well, yes, actually. And look at Trunks' face. He's shocked. Trunks, of course, is surprised that Piccolo at this point in time can't win. Now, remember, Trunks hasn't actually gone to the chamber yet for the second time, which is why his hair is short. Basically what happened is that Piccolo went in first, Vegeta went in second, and then Trunks goes in third. So this means that Piccolo is stronger than Trunks when he first emerged from the chamber, and also stronger than Vegeta. In the anime, Vegeta talks shit and he's like, oh, what were you doing in there, taking a nap and blah, blah. Vegeta's just being Vegeta. He thinks he could beat anyone. He's stronger. He's just like a dick. And so he pretends that he is still stronger than Piccolo, but he's not. Trunks is the one who isn't going to lie. I can't think of a single lie he tells in the story. He just kind of like evades answers early on. But point is that he is shocked that Piccolo, in the anime, he emerges and he's like, oh my God, look how strong this dude is. Oh my Kami, which is technically who I'm looking at right now, and then after that, what also happens, well, later on, it goes on to say that Piccolo, in the scene, visually, using the visuals, because Toriyama loved to do this, Piccolo, well, he is stronger than Vegeta and Trunks were. Piccolo at this point in time would wreck Super Vegeta, Super Trunks in the grade 2 and maybe grade 3. And also, again, he would be able to beat Semi-Perfect Cell. A lot of people think that Piccolo was maybe as strong as Semi-Perfect Cell here. Again, bullshit. He isn't. He's way stronger than that. And this is proven time and time again, especially in the fight against the Cell Juniors. So Vegeta and Trunks are stronger. I'd say that Vegeta is the strongest of everyone who isn't Goku and Gohan. But either way, Goku and Gohan's base form and their Super Saiyan is way more powerful because Vegeta didn't sense how strong Goku actually got. He didn't see his full power. And so he wouldn't be able to train to surpass that. He arguably became a mastered Super Saiyan by the time of the Cell Saga. He doesn't stay in the Super Saiyan form like Goku and Gohan do, but he and Trunks aren't as bulky when they actually go Super Saiyan during the fights. Instead, what we see is that Goku and Gohan, they stay in the forms, but Vegeta and Trunks only power up when the Cell Juniors show up. So briefly, Toriyama gave us a little intermission, and I mentioned this before, tying into some of the power scaling earlier with the androids. So I do want to talk about it with Trunks' story, or the history of Trunks, in which we have some more power level estimates. Now, in the manga, there are differences. Like Trunks is already a Super Saiyan as a kid, just like he is in the Buu Saga, in fighting against Gohan. Now, it's interesting that we see Trunks as a kid Super Saiyan fighting against base form Gohan. Trunks is clearly putting an effort. So a lot of people would be like, oh, well, does this mean that Gohan's base form is stronger than a Super Saiyan, or like stronger than Goku Namek or something? No, I just think that Trunks somehow became a Super Saiyan, whether you want to believe in S cells or whatever Toriyama added in after the fact, like all the extra stuff that doesn't always line up. And he became one when he was a lot weaker, and then he just got physically stronger as he got older. Whereas Gohan, in this case, again, it's implied right here that, oh, you look so much like your dad in that gi. And that's why I wear it. I hope I can be as strong as my dad before he passed away, but it's not as easy as it seems. Gohan is not as powerful as his dad post Yardrat, like I mentioned earlier, even many years later of training, like close to 20 years. Then we have, at this point in time, he goes to fight the androids. Now, Gohan knocks out Trunks, and he's already kind of aware he's going to die when he goes to fight them. This is future Gohan, and also in the original timeline, which this is not the original timeline, the same story basically plays out. So he knows that he's going to die, and so he wants to keep him there as somebody who could defeat maybe one of the androids in the future if he fails. So Gohan goes to fly in and fight against 17, and he's saying how he's become a lot stronger, and he's been training, and he's going to be able to beat 17. Now watch this. 17 says that, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I was only using half of my strength last time. Some translations say less than half, but the fact is that Trunks, the only time he's seen arguably 17 and 18 fight, they were not going full power. 17 goes full power here, and Gohan, he just gets killed off screen. He does not stand any chance at all against 17, who is now going full power. So arguably, it's a similar situation to what happened with Vegeta. Gohan surpassed the power that he was fighting against with 17, arguably, with 17's full power. But at that point in time, it was actually half or less than half of that. And so 17 goes full power and kills him. Trunks doesn't feel any of this, obviously can't feel 17. He was unconscious, and he only goes to fight him in the manga, as far as we know, a single time, which is right after this, which happens off screen, and he gets wrecked. It's interesting that he says that he's no match for the androids, when earlier in the arc he said that he could kind of fight them a little bit. But again, that goes to show you that he's actually compared right here to Gohan. It's like, oh, do you think you're actually stronger than him? Again, there are translations that say that you might have gotten stronger than him, but there are different things that go in and out. Either way, I think that there's a good suggestion that the androids never actually fought Trunks anywhere near full power until, he eventually kills them when he returns. And that as a result, you could make an argument that they might just not really be that different in terms of power from the androids from the future. But yeah, with that being said, we're going to get into the Cell games and the end of this momentarily. But before we get into that next part of the video, guys, I just wanted to once again do a cheap plug for my new book, The Children of Ama, Nemesis the Absence. This is a multi-hour long video, and I think that a multi-hour long book that you'll be able to enjoy for a very long time to come, even more than this video, in fact, is something that's worth checking out. The story of an immortal family taking on the embodiment of the absence, told through the guise of the character Seraph, who himself is wielding the fundamental forces of creation to battle against evil in the name of vengeance. So I think it's highly worth checking out. And, we're grinding hard here, guys. You got to respect the hustle. So pick up your own copy today in the description and that much more. But that being said, let's get into the Cell games. So as we see during the fight, Goku actually goes full power now. And when he does, we see just how everybody reacts. Vegeta, he's now in shock because he sees that Goku is way more powerful than he realized. Same thing with Trunks. He's like, wow, there's no one who has power comparable. However, this entire time, there's been little hints about, well, yeah, but Goku's doing all right, but are you sure? So Gohan the whole time, it's being kind of implied to us that he is still more powerful than Goku, even when Goku's going full power, to the point to where he and a lot of Goku's fans start to think that, Gohan is actually not as powerful and that Goku is holding back, which he's not. And so basically the two begin to fight after Cell powers up as well, but Cell is only really powering up in order to match Goku because he wants a fun fight. That's what he's saying right here. He's just like 17 and 18, that he wants a fun fight. He keeps his opponents alive in order for him to be able to get the best thrill in the challenge. He is part Goku. He is a dark reflection, the Jungian shadow of Goku and all of these other characters over time. And just like Frieza, for instance, he could have blown up the planet at any time, but he wanted to test himself. So all that is embodied within Cell. Goku actually probably wouldn't have been able to survive this Kamehameha that Cell charges up, but Cell purposely did this knowing that Goku would fly away, in turn then using his ability to, well, what does he do? Dodge out of the way with his instant transmission, go behind Cell, and then kick him when he's off guard and actually draw blood getting through his defenses. So Cell has, suppressed or output the level of power comparative to what Goku is using. But as we can see, as the time goes on, Cell decides that he could, output even more energy and start to show the other characters that he is also additionally, stronger and faster than Goku is. He starts to do that right here, taking advantage of Goku, outspeeding him, being stronger, dealing more shots, more damage. Goku's doing his best here, but he still isn't really quite on the same level, especially because the fact that Cell points out that, we should probably just get rid of this ring so that we don't have an out of balance anymore. But they keep going, Cell keeps having the advantage until Goku does a last-ditch effort in which he goes up in the air and charges up his warp Kamehameha. He puts everything he can into this blast, while trying to condense it as much as possible, kind of like Vegeta when he narrowed the blast with the final flash to not blow up the planet, and then he fires it. But he teleports right in front of Cell, catching him off guard, going beneath his defenses and firing it. And, Toriyama always loves to do these wacky faces whenever he fires a blast, whenever somebody's killed with a blast. Frieza, Cell eventually for real, and he blows up the top half of his body. And then in turn, what happens? He is able to do this, but again, would he have been able to actually do this if Cell went full power from the start and was bracing himself? I don't think so. And the fact that Cell, he still had lots of energy left, as it's pointed out, and he gets right back up and he's ready to go, that shows again that he wasn't going anywhere near full power because he would be way more exhausted at this point in time. Of course, when Goku starts to use a technique that he borrows from his rival, which is Vegeta's technique, he starts to show that Cell is huffing and puffing a little bit. He puts up that barrier like Android 17, and he is a little bit winded. But again, not to the degree that it would really matter, because after all, he even tells Goku that he should take a sensu bean, and then it'll be a little bit more fun for him. And at this point in time, even if all the other fighters jumped in, the thing is that Cell still is going so far below his full power that he would still be able to defeat everyone. However, at this point in time, Goku gives up in a big subversion, and we have him step in to allow Gohan to fight. This is where he points out something that everybody skips because they all either don't read this or watch this part of the series very often, or they just want to like block it out, blah, blah, blah. Goku is the strongest no matter what. He beats everybody. And instead, Goku actually is like, well, actually, no. Gohan is already stronger than I can imagine, and his great powers started to awaken the time chamber. And when you're watching me fight Cell, was at any point I too strong for you? Gohan says, well, actually, no, but you were holding back. He's like, well, I don't know about Cell, but I was fighting as hard as I could. And the thing is, people are like, well, why didn't he use the Spirit Bomb? Because Cell knows the Spirit Bomb, it would just kill him before he could do it. There's nothing that Goku could have done to win here. Again, the entire part of the story. Goku didn't purposely allow himself to be weaker than Gohan and to die and commit seppuku and Sudoku, whatever else you have, in order for his son to be able to become the main character because of some stupid fan theory that people have, like how Goku actually threw a laced sensu bean at Cell or anything like that. No, he was just weaker. His son was stronger. The end. That's it. All right. At this point, give Cell a sensu bean because, again, I did a whole video about that too. A lot of people are like, oh, well, this is really stupid. This is a bad idea. Yes, if you don't know how to play chess. It certainly is. But the thing is that with Goku, well, actually, he gave Cell a sensu bean because he knew that Gohan would be so strong it wouldn't make any difference. And not just that, but also thinking smart about this, Goku knew that Cell being a little bit tired would cause him to act more aggressively. It would cause him to be more frustrated and to lash out and probably not give Gohan as much of a chance. The fact that Goku gave him a sensu bean made him that much more supremely confident and made him that much more likely to play with his food like a Frieza or somebody else like that, and thus in turn allow Gohan the ability to go full power, because if he was tired and slightly sapped of energy, there might have been more of a question in Cell's mind if he could handle it. But when he's at full power, and I don't believe he got a Zenkai because he never was near death. Again, he does not get a Zenkai until it's specifically stated later on when he blows himself up. And as a result, well, this means that Goku was actually smarter than most of the people who say he was dumb when he did this, because of the fact that, yes, he gave Cell a sensu bean, and that actually had a positive benefit. It's not in hindsight or anything like that. This is actually an intelligent move by Goku and a bad, unintelligent move by everybody who criticizes them. But at this point, Gohan powers up and Cell is shocked. Everybody is like, wait a second, that's actually Gohan's power? Everybody except for Goku. And even Cell is like, perhaps Goku wasn't lying. Perhaps there was a bit of truth after all. He sounds like Keith David in my mind. But still, to say that he could defeat me is a bit of a stretch. I will kill him before he hits me. You will regret your actions, Son Goku. Because of your mistake, your son will be killed. I'm starting to sound like the people from Galaxy Quest. But yeah, as we could see, Gohan and Cell are fighting, and Gohan is blocking everything that Cell is doing, and he just kind of, he just has the advantage. Except for when Cell then goes on to say, well, you're awfully quick. I'll have to use my full speed against you, which with Cell, always put an asterisk until he goes full power. So Cell is using even more speed and power already than he used against Goku. That's why he says full speed against you instead of I'm already using my full speed because I was just fighting against your father with it. And boom, he starts to get the better. But Gohan, as we see, is not actually fighting back at all. This fight is more like Luke Skywalker versus Darth Vader in Return of the Jedi than it is in Empire Strikes Back. We have one character who fundamentally does not want to hurt this guy because this is all a game and Cell could stop at any time. This is all something that this guy really has no reason to hurt and kill everyone. He is his own being, and yet Gohan doesn't want to kill him because he knows that if he snaps, he will do just that. Instead, he's trying to reason with him. But as Android 16 points out eventually, he won't be able to because there are certain people that words alone will not reach. So, of course, after this point, we do get the situation with the Cell Juniors. Now, when that happens, here's another ambiguity. How strong are the Cell Juniors? Well, I do think that with regard to them, they are probably somewhat weaker than the amount of strength that Cell showed when he fought against Goku. They are stronger, possibly, than the amount of strength that Cell was using against Trunks and Vegeta, but considering the fact that they are able to fight well against Vegeta and Trunks, who are way more powerful than they were before their second time in the chamber, and against Piccolo, that means that they are almost certainly stronger than the 20-ish% maybe that Cell was using against the two of them when he fought them when he first became perfect. And the fact that they're fighting against and getting the better of Goku, who is exhausted, and like I mentioned with stamina and how important it is in this arc, means that he won't really be able to output as much as he could before. Again, that says that to me, I'd put them at maybe a third of Cell's level of power. Weaker than Goku and Gohan as Super Saiyans, they'd be able to beat both them, but stronger than everybody else there to where they can't beat the Cell Juniors individually. They can punch them back and stuff, but when they really fight at full power, they are not as strong. So let's say that they're maybe a third of Cell's full power as Perfect Cell. I do want to point out something with Android 16. He does grab Cell from behind when he's Perfect Cell and actually holds him in place, and Cell doesn't like break free right away. You could argue it's because he's so surprised, but it is strange to think that 16, who shouldn't really be stronger than he was when, before Cell blasted his face off and couldn't even like do anything to semi-perfect Cell, can hold this Cell in place. And so maybe you can argue that his physical strength here is greater when he does something like this compared to punching. But I would say that most of this probably comes down to Cell just being caught off guard. And when he breaks free, he just blasts him and kills him. He could kill him easily, which he does later on. But again, when Cell pushes Gohan to the edge, and he's beating his friends and family to death with his little children. 16 gives his great speech about how there are some people that that words will not reach, and that you must fight in the name of justice and to protect the life. And thus, of course, 16 gets killed. Cell stomps him to death, if you would want to say a robot can die. And Gohan snaps and goes Super Saiyan Sue, or Super Saiyan 2. And again, everybody's shocked except for Goku, who knows that Gohan will already be this strong. Again, it's implied that he might have sensed this power in the time chamber, and the anime literally shows that. So again, this is why Goku was so confident the entire time. Cell is stronger than he was, but Gohan is that much stronger than Cell. So here come the power estimates of the upper limits of these characters, because we do go on to see Gohan not only splattering the Cell Juniors everywhere. The manga version is way more violent than the anime one. They turn to atoms and dust in the anime. In the manga, Gohan just like splatters them everywhere. So let's see what happens here. Gohan, after this, he goes on to fight against Cell in Cell's full power. This is the first time that Cell ever uses full power. He does not go anywhere near it against Goku or against the Gohan he was just fighting. That's why a lot of people over time have said that they think that Gohan actually would have been able to maybe fight against and defeat Cell before he even went Super Saiyan 2. I strongly disagree. I don't think he would stand any chance, and neither would Goku, or if the two of them tag teamed against him, or if everybody jumped him at once. Cell is that strong, and we see that right here. Even after everybody is sensing the power of Super Saiyan 2 Gohan, what happens? Cell goes full power, and everybody's like crapping their pants again. And if you would count that as pants, I don't know, their bodysuits, their yoga outfits. And then, even Goku is kind of shaking in his boots. And everybody's saying, wow, he's finally revealing the full power. It's making the planet shake. And, we get that one scene again from earlier that I mentioned with Vegeta. He's like, oh, that's all you got? You still look weak to me. But this is Cell when he's serious, when he's going full power, other than the bulked up form. And so what do we see? Punches Gohan, and it does nothing. And the same thing happens here. He punches Cell once, and he's already taking damage. He punches him again in the jaw, and then he falls back and he starts stumbling on the ground, bleeding, and Vegeta's teeth are chattering because he's like, holy shit, what the hell is happening? This is like a nightmare. Whereas Goku's like, no, this is what I saw. This is the hope. This is, the Messiah of the Saiyans now. In the anime, it says, oh Messiah, in the scene in the Japanese when he goes full power with spirit versus spirit. It's such a fitting song because that's essentially what's happening. Much like in Terminator, we have John Connor and saving everybody from the humans, the son of the current fighters. We have, in this case, Gohan stepping up to fight and defeat Cell. He's so much more powerful than Cell at this point. That even when Cell jumps up in the air and fires a full power Kamehameha, it's nothing to Gohan. Everybody's shocked. Even Goku's like, holy crap, he's going to blow up the whole planet. We're going to die. But then Gohan just casually, while everybody's getting hit by the energies like shockwave, essentially, like, the excess energies like pushing on everybody, Gohan just like starts to casually with his hands down say Kamehameha. And he fires his attack and it just pushes Cell's back and blasts him, and it's like vaporizing chunks of him. So what's really going on here then? Just like, how strong is Cell comparative to Gohan, and why is Gohan like so casually breaking him? I mean, after all, in guidebooks, it says that Super Saiyan 2 is 2 times stronger than Super Saiyan. So wait, what? Is Gohan 20% stronger than Cell? Wait, what? Well, actually, no. I would say that's not the case. I mean, we see Cell bulks up right here, even more insanely than Trunks did. You could argue he's even using like Ozaru or, his, what is it, like the giant Piccolo sort of thing right here. He can't hit Gohan, but his durability should theoretically be higher, right? Except he hits him so hard in the side of the head that it makes him puke. And, in the manga version or the anime version, he's also like, hits him in the stomach afterward, which makes him puke. But in the anime, I think this ties into Cell having the core in his head. And that's where he keeps 17 and 18, because then he spits up 18 after getting hit in the head. Now, nobody take this panel out of context, because I'm sure that that's totally going to be safe for work right there. But anyway, cause him to regress. So how is this possible? Well, I think it's simple. We'll take a look at Cell's power that he was using against Gohan and Goku. Personally, I would say that when Cell was fighting against Goku, Cell powered himself up to Goku's level of power in order to give him a good fight, but he still wasn't really trying. So for me, Cell, when he's fighting against Goku here, is only really using about 40 to 50% of his power. Maybe half power, if that. It's kind of like when Frieza decided to start fighting against Goku and, at half power. He's like, well, it's been fun. In this case, that's what he's doing. And so when he goes from 40 to 50, let's say, that's when he starts to just get the better of Goku the whole time. That's also why Goku could blast him and actually hurt, him and blast the top half of his body. He wasn't really defending himself anywhere near as much. Now, when it comes to Gohan, we see that Cell eventually has to try a little bit harder. He has to use his full speed, as he says right around here. So I'd say that because Gohan is stronger than Goku, Cell probably uses closer to like 60% of his power. I'd say that maybe Gohan is about 20% stronger than Goku in terms of their bodies at that point in time as Super Saiyans when they emerge. That's why Gohan doesn't have trouble keeping up with Goku. He is still outmatched by Cell, but he, just as a Super Saiyan, Cell, when Gohan transforms, or really powers up, he says, oh, well, maybe there's a little bit more truth to this after all. So Cell, in this case, would then be close to twice as strong as Goku and Gohan. Less than twice as strong as Gohan, in up to or higher than twice as strong as Goku. Okay, so in terms of power levels then, if you want to give them at this point in the story, they've essentially just, it's so hard to even quantify them at this point, but if we say that characters like these have power levels still, barring the range, let's just say the baseline, I would say that Goku's baseline power level would be 1.5 billion. That's typically what I've viewed it as. 10 times stronger than he was on Namek. I'd say that maybe he got up to twice as strong, probably less than that, training with Piccolo and Gohan before the androids, and then 5+ times stronger in the time chamber, meaning that he would be about 10 times stronger than he was on Namek, or 30 million base form. You could say a little bit higher than that. Personally, I don't think the Saiyans ever in their normal base forms surpass Frieza on Namek. So by the time of Battle of Gods, when Goku is said by Beerus to not be able to beat Frieza in his base form, for me, I was one of the few people I think that actually didn't have a problem with that. A lot of people are like, oh, he was suppressed and blah, blah. Nobody contradicts it. And it's kind of like Toriyama, giving the Frieza power level, which I actually don't agree with, the 1.3 million, in Resurrection F. Instead, I would say that, no, Goku and Vegeta and everybody else in their base forms never surpass Frieza. Unless you believe that the multipliers shrank, then you could argue they did. But personally, I'm more conservative in that way. I'd say that even the Buu Saga, their power levels and their base are like 60 to 80 million, something like that, maybe. Now, in the case of Gohan here, however, I think it's worth mentioning this. Gohan, in this case, would be about 20% higher than Goku. So he'd probably be somewhere around, 1.75 billion, something like that, maybe, right? I'm doing the math off the top of my head. I didn't exactly go to school for that, right? I'm not a mathematician, but either way, fact of the matter is that he'd be maybe around there. Cell, on the other hand, would be somewhere around 3.5 billion as his own power level, if using this particular scale. Obviously, a lot of room for ambiguity and whatever you want to attribute to it. But for me, I'd say Cell had a 3.75 billion as his power level, somewhere in that range, perhaps. Whereas Gohan was like a 1.6 to 1.8, and Goku is like a 1.4 to 1.5, something like that. So that's the general ranges I would give them, aside from like the short bursts when they could deal even more damage. Now, when Gohan goes to his Super Saiyan 2, he does not become 2 times stronger. This is something that a lot of people also, I think, with their interpretations, obviously this is all mine at the end of the day. I might have, said things like, people are wrong and bullshit, whatever. But either way, for me, personally, I believe that Gohan became 3 to 4 times stronger. And that might be confusing. Wait a second, the guidebooks say that 2 times, or it's Super Saiyan 2 and whatever. But for me personally, I think that Gohan's hidden power brought out even more, to a degree, to where it became additional boost on top of that. So Gohan's base form actually also increased in power by 2 to 3 times, or so like 1.5 to 2 times, something like that. So basically, by the time that Gohan is fighting against Cell, he's actually 3 to 4 times stronger than he just was, which is the reason why Gohan right here is casually annihilating Cell at full power, even though Cell was close to twice as strong as he was, because Gohan then suddenly becomes 1.5 to 2 times stronger than Cell, which is approximately like around the same range you could argue that he was when he was wrecking Super Buu, base Super Buu in the next arc, because of course we have Super Buu plus Gotenks, who is already weaker than Gohan, and obviously Piccolo, and then he's able to beat Gohan, and other instances throughout the story. So for me, that's showing right here and now that Gohan is way more than twice as strong as he was before, and way more for some people is 1,000,000, way more for some people is 20%. But for me, in this case, I would say that he is now 2 to 3 times stronger, meaning that his base form and his Super Saiyan form would also be 1.5 to 2 times stronger. And thus, as a result, you can argue that his Super Saiyan form after going Super Saiyan 2 would be somewhere around the power of Perfect Cell, which is, again, why he's just annihilating him. He could kill him at any time, but as he told Goku before, that he wants to make him suffer more in order to punish him for everything that he's done. he's giving in, just like Goku gave in to the unbridled rage of the Super Saiyan when he was fighting against Frieza after he killed Krillin. Gohan is giving in to the unbridled rage of Super Saiyan 2 to seek justice and revenge upon Cell for everything he's done. Of course, at this point, Cell goes to blow himself up. And as we have seen throughout the course of the story, even in Pokemon, when somebody blows himself up, they are going to output so much more energy than they normally would have, to where it would be a significant threat for even way stronger characters, because the fact that normally when a character fires an attack or anything, they're probably using somewhere around the same amount of energy, again stamina, in order to offset the damage that they would do to their own body. You fire a blast, well, you could probably vaporize your hand if you don't fire the blast without any protection yourself, subconsciously or otherwise. Cell has already decided that he's going to die, and so he's like, well, I'm going to take you with me, I'm going to blow up the planet. And at this point, he is also so volatile that even if Gohan could somehow survive this, which I don't think he would be able to, Cell would blow up the second he touched him. Aside from Goku tapping him to teleport him away. Now, Goku did not lower his guard and allow himself to die because Chi-Chi was pregnant and he didn't want to raise a child and whatever stupid other theories I see people say on the internet all the time. No, he teleported in here. This is the only way to save everybody. And he blew up. He didn't have enough time to escape. This is just like a fun little scene. He would not have enough time to lock on a King Kai and teleport back to the Earth or New Namek or anything like that. There is not enough. He blows up and Goku dies because even fully healed, he would not be able to survive this explosion. That's just how much a self-destruction puts out. At this point, Cell returns as Super Perfect Cell, and he kills Trunks. Now, a lot of people also believe that Cell killed Trunks intentionally because of the fact that, well, he did it because he wanted to take out the biggest threat to him at the time. I don't really believe that either because, again, I don't think that Trunks really was anywhere near as powerful as Cell, even with his grade 3 after the time in the time chamber again. Instead, it comes down to a matter of, well, actually, what happened is that he is not as, he just accidentally fires at, well, not accidentally, but he kills him kind of just randomly. He just fires a blast the second he shows up, and he's like, oh, who did I hit? Huh. Oh, it's Trunks. Okay. It's more of like a time echo. Trunks was killed, the original one, by this Cell, and then he kills him again. That's just kind of how it is. But when Cell shows up, notice he's now Super Perfect Cell, and he has this lightning around him. Personally, I would say this is Cell's version of Super Saiyan 2. Whether it was when he was perfect or beforehand, he was basically his version of Super Saiyan before that. Not a 50 times multiplier, but again, additionally more of like, what the computer replicates through his body. The computer designed him to make everything as best and perfect as it is. That's why even though he has Piccolo cells for regeneration, he is able to come back from just a clump of cells that existed in his head at the time, as he points out right here. His core was undamaged, and because of that, he is able to return. Now, of course, this is arguably a plot hole because Goku vaporized his head, but you could also argue that perhaps what really happened here is that Cell's core will either, a lot of people say maybe he can move it around his body. Another argument is that instead what can happen is that if the clump of cells in his head survives, what will occur is that, it only will have to do this if it's the only thing left. So if there's like parts of him that are still around that can regenerate from that, he'll regenerate, including the core. But if the core is the only thing left, he'll regenerate his entire body. Again, it's also kind of like, well, why did Cell come back at full power or even stronger? We even see him huffing and puffing after regeneration. Why the hell would that happen? Doesn't make any sense. But Cell also went into a new form, a new transformation. That's why I think that this is probably kind of like his other Super Saiyan 2 form, because the fact that It's like Goku on Namek. Goku on Namek was exhausted. Kaioken wrecked his body when he used times 20 against Frieza. He had nothing left. That's why he had to use a spirit bomb and so on. He couldn't do anything. He could barely move. He goes Super Saiyan and he could fight against Frieza at full power. I think it's like this here. It's the regeneration kind of refresh to their energy. Cell powers up, and now he's almost as strong as Gohan in this transformation, or, you know, he powered up just like Son Gohan, whatever you want to say in the original Japanese. It depends on the translation. But either way, Cell got a Zenkai boost from regenerating, where he could be perfect even without 18, because 17 is probably in his core, in his head, and still incorporated into his being. And he powered up to his perfect form, and additionally went Super Saiyan 2 basically on top of that. So for this, a lot of people remember the Funimation line of, oh, if a single cell remains. Obviously that wouldn't make any sense if you really think about it, because like even after Gohan blasted and vaporized Cell, he would still come back, because like if he bled anywhere on the ground, he would come back. You know, like that's how cells work. People are like, oh, well, how did they get the cells from Frieza and King Cold when Trunks cut them up and vaporized them? People just lose cells all the time. I mean, they're basically lizards. They're like probably shedding skin particulates and spitting on the floor and stuff all the time. That's all full of cells, guys. So like Cell, he would never have died at all, and he would still be just like chilling and coming back constantly if it was just one cell that needed to survive, right? So that's why, you know, the Funimation, they tried to fix this, but it actually made it worse in some ways. But Gohan, when he senses Cell's power, he smirks and he powers up again. Now, one thing is you could argue maybe Gohan was just like a regular Super Saiyan. Again, kind of like what happened with Goku on Namek. He goes to base and then he goes Super Saiyan 2. His hair does look different, but there are lots of times during this fight when Gohan is a Super Saiyan 2 and the lightning isn't always around him. So that's one thing to keep in mind. I've talked about in videos before, but Gohan still thinks he could beat Cell. And personally, I agree with them. I think that out of these two characters, that Gohan is still stronger than Super Perfect Cell because of how Zenkais work. I did a long video, nowhere near as long as this one, obviously, about 45 minutes long, deep dive into Zenkais, how they originated, what they do, how they work, and applying them to our real world and everything like that, called How Does Zenkai Boost Work in Dragon Ball Z, or How Does Zenkais Work, whatever. You can see it on my channel under recommended videos. And during that point in time, I explained that characters through the active threat Zenkai theory scale up to the active threat at the time. So whatever they can sense, whatever their body feels. So what happened? Well, Cell only sensed and felt the power of suppressed Super Saiyan 2 Gohan, who was not going full power at the time, which means that his body only scaled up to as strong as or stronger than the suppressed Gohan at the time. In other words, Cell is not as powerful as Gohan when he is Super Perfect Cell. Instead, he is still weaker. However, that doesn't really matter come the fight because it's interrupted. Instead of us getting a long dragged out fight between the two of them, or maybe a short one where Gohan just stomps him anyway and just makes him blow himself up again, what happens? Well, in this case, Vegeta rushes in and attacks. Now, I actually did a video years ago talking about Vegeta got a rage boost. There are a lot of Dragon Ball fans who do not believe that anyone other than Gohan got rage boost, and that the concept does not actually exist up until Battle of Gods, that Vegeta never did. However, the fact that Vegeta powers up here as a Super Saiyan, and like I said before, you could argue he is a mastered Super Saiyan. I did a video about that too, if Vegeta and Trunks mastered Super Saiyan before the Cell games. This is why I'm not pointing the top right corner and telling you that there are things up there, guys, because otherwise I would have a million of them right now. I'd have over 9,000 or over 8,000 for manga purists and Japanese fans. And he fires an attack at Cell, and Cell braces himself. Like, look at the effort in Cell's face. Maybe he's just putting on like a show, kind of like he did every time he fought Vegeta, but he then goes on to use, of course, the most powerful move in all of sports entertainment, the RKO, actually no, the Vegeta's technique, and proceeds to fire all these blasts that are always useless against Cell. But yeah, I mean, that implies to me that Vegeta probably got his rage boost in this moment when his son was murdered in front of his eyes. It only makes sense. Adrenaline, whatever you call it. He doesn't have any big potential underneath like Gohan, but he got a little bit stronger and he attacked Cell, and Cell was not expecting that. And he, the fact that he could do this rather than nothing, like when Cell was at 20% of his power earlier, and now Cell is like 15 and whatever many times stronger than he was back then, however math works. I'm an American, sorry, my education system was horrible. Then what happens? Well, that tells me Vegeta got even stronger than ever on top of his training in the time chamber. I don't even know if Goku would have been able to do that, to be honest. And so he smacks Vegeta away. Gohan flies in, but Gohan underestimates Cell. Now, even though he does have his aura up, he is hit while he's not defending himself. He thinks that he'll be able to outspeed this attack, which is the reason he runs in to try and stop Vegeta. He doesn't run in to take the bullet. You can see in his face, he's surprised that he even gets hit with it. And so he underestimates how powerful Cell has become, which he then goes on to say right here, Cell's grown more than I thought. So again, he... at this point in time, I mean, Cell does say I'm not playing around anymore. So sometimes people take that as like he didn't even try. But Gohan didn't even try to block it either. Gohan didn't deflect it. He literally just flew in there thinking, oh, I'll just grab Vegeta and get out of the way in time. It won't make a difference, just like he did with the sensu beans, all the other stuff, except he was arrogant once again. And once again, his arrogance is his fall. Twice the pride, double the fall. Like Count Dooku said, rest in peace, Christopher Lee, and Count Dooku especially. Rest in peace is. He's got his hands on the floor. He's got his head on the floor. I don't know how many bonfires they need for that guy. So at this point, Cell then charges up his laser beam, his death beam, whatever the narrator says, the camera guy, and he then reveals that he is able to destroy the entire solar system. Now, this is where I get a little bit into feats, because the thing is that, no, I'm not going to show feat pics. That's, get your head out of the gutter or whatever. So at this point, he's talking about destroying the solar system. Now, we could talk about how Frieza, with 530,000, blew up planet Vegeta, which is 10 times the mass or density of planet Earth, maybe both. So you can argue that he should have been able to do this way sooner, and that he should be able to blow up way more than one solar system. Well, keep in mind that Cell at no point says, now I have enough ki to destroy only the solar system in just one time. Instead, he's saying just with the ki he's gathered, he can destroy the solar system. So you can argue that Cell could blow up the solar system, teleport to another one, blow that up, and just keep doing that over and over and over until he runs out of energy. He's not just saying one. Another thing is, too, the solar system is way bigger than one planet, especially when you use a chain reaction to blow up the planet. Cell could fire a blast, theoretically, at the sun and blow up the sun and cause a supernova to blow up the solar system. He could fire a blast and then control it with his mind. It'll fly and bulldoze every planet and blow them all up one after another. I would say 9 times, but then I'll piss off the astronomers. So I'll just say, however many times in the future when we have 15 other planets that they found closer to the sun or further away with advanced Hubble telescope technology or whatever. He could just fire a blast directly next to the sun and blow away the sun and everything else in the solar system just with the explosion of the blast itself. We don't know how it works. It's never explained. Toriyama just wrote this because he thought it sounded even more impressive than blowing up a planet, because obviously it is, because he blows up the solar system. But theoretically, Cell can blow up way more solar systems. I mean, after all, when it comes to the ki blast, the ki beam struggle, the two of them are firing this blast for a little while. It's not like it's just constantly. So it's like, is every single second that they're firing this blast one solar system worth of destruction? Or is it every second is 1/1,000,000th of a solar system worth of destruction? We don't really know. Again, it's never explained or elaborated on, and nobody ever thinks of this shit except for me. So during this, Piccolo does say that Gohan isn't strong enough and he doesn't stand a chance. But Gohan does say to Cell, this is another thing worth mentioning, that after the awesome scene where Vegeta apologizes to Gohan because of all the great character development in this arc, that what happens? well, just get it over with. Because he's now useless on the battlefield. And as he tells Goku when Goku starts to talk to him, that he can only use his left arm and that his ki has gone down. Of course, this is one translation, which again, I'll say is iffy. There are translations that say that he only has half of his power, that his energy has been cut in half, whatever, which you could argue is the case because earlier in the arc, we saw that not only the case with Gohan, where it's made a big deal about how he only has one arm, as Trunks puts right here. And then also when Cell drains, when he sucks Piccolo's energy out of his arm, it's also conveyed to us that Piccolo would be useless in a fight between the two of them because he only has one arm. Let's see if I could actually find that. Yeah. I no longer can maintain balance, which makes quick movements far more difficult. And I'm going to get into that actually momentarily as well in terms of the fight between the two of them. In that Cell wins just because of the fact that Piccolo no longer has an arm, which was fainting or a feign. But in this case, as we're told right here, it makes a significant difference in terms of Gohan's energy, his ki and everything like that. But personally, I would argue, even though Toriyama drew it where Gohan is, he didn't think anyone would zoom in to like 1,000,000% of the image. Oh shit. Like crashing as I'm zooming in so far. He didn't think that just because, he didn't think that somebody like me would zoom in this far. But anyway, he drew it with both his hands clasped. But you could argue that Gohan actually is at half energy, or that this is all in Gohan's mind, which is like Goku is saying here. I think is pretty much proven later on. Because during the Kamehameha clash, the beam struggle, whatever you want to call it, whatever the video games call it, we have this occur, and Gohan is not actually going his full complete power during the clash yet. As Goku says that, somewhere deep down in your heart, you're thinking about how you'll damage the Earth. Don't worry about it. You can use the Dragon Balls to restore the damage. Just like Vegeta using the Final Flash or Goku using the Kamehameha with the warp, Gohan doesn't want to blow up the planet. But the thing is, if he kills Cell, it doesn't matter because they can just wish back the planet with the Namekian Dragon Balls anyway. And thus, as a result, it would fix everything. So Goku is saying, don't hold that back. Don't hold anything back. But fortunately, Vegeta interferes and Gohan fires a blast which consumes cells, and we get more of that goofy face that I mentioned that Toriyama likes to draw, and annihilates him. So Cell, right before this happened, was saying how he was going to unleash all of his power. So Cell was not actually going full power with this final attack. And Gohan only goes full power at the very end. So you can argue that maybe when the two of them went full power, that they would just be matched again. However, I still think that Gohan actually would have won, that it would have been a little bit closer, but he would have slowly overpowered Cell's attack with this final burst. It would have exhausted Gohan to the point where he still passed out because he used everything, but Cell would die. Because after all, if Gohan was still stronger than or weaker than Cell, in the middle of this happening, Cell still could have fired his attack. In the manga, it's slower, and faster. In the anime, it's slower, but you could argue that Cell still could have survived this somehow or overpowered it. So I think that a lot of it for Gohan, his half weakness, isn't really the case. It's more of it being in his mind. It's more of the fact that Ki has a large mental component to the power. And thus, as a result, when you have that weakened and diminished and you're demoralized, you then in turn are not going to be able to output as much of the power as you theoretically would have been able to beforehand, which then in turn means what? Well, it means that you're more likely to lose. Again, using a positive example from Dragon Ball Super, we do see this happen with Jiren. He's demoralized, and so Frieza can just beat him around and mock him and everything like that. But with that being said, when he stops being demoralized, he gets his power back. And the same thing with Gohan. Gohan finally has the opportunity to not hold back. He's being encouraged by his dad, and he wins. Without his dad's help here, being coaching him the whole time, he would have lost. And that's why, inevitably and invariably, Gohan wins the day. However, if the two of them, as I had mentioned before with this Piccolo example, were to fight after Cell ruined Gohan's arm, would this actually be the case? I mean, Gohan might have actually been stronger, as Goku is pointing out, but you can argue that Cell would have just been able to win anyway. If Cell wasn't a dumbass, like, most of the Dragon Ball villains are, and decided to just turn everything into a single final showdown with a single blast, then he could have just teleported and kept punching and kicking Gohan in the arm and blasting him and all this other stuff while Gohan couldn't really fight as well because he was demoralized, and also because of the fact that his arm was broken, and then Gohan would have lost to Cell. So there's a strong argument to be made that despite the fact that Gohan still had a higher power level deep down inside him, when it comes crashing down and hurts inside, he still would have lost because he wouldn't be able to fight as well as Cell. And at this point in time, even if Gohan was stronger, the disparity or difference or whatever have you between the two of them would have been enough to where Cell could have won because of his technique, which is usually when technique matters the most in Dragon Ball, when two characters are close to each other in levels of power. And so invariably, when it comes down to who is the stronger of the two and who is the strongest of the arc, I would say that would be Gohan. So if we're going to do a descending tier of hierarchy, let's say, of power, I would say that number 1, Gohan. Number 2 would be Super Perfect Cell. Number 3, Perfect Cell. Number 4, Gohan again, but as a Super Saiyan. So Super Saiyan 2, Super Saiyan 1. And then below him, Goku. Maybe you could argue that Vegeta would be somewhere around there or even higher than Gohan before he goes Super Saiyan 2 when he raged out after Trunks got killed, because of what I showed before. And then, of course, you have Super Vegeta after the Time Chamber second time, Super Trunks after that, Piccolo after that, and then downward and downward in terms of descending hierarchy of power. But with that being said, guys, that has been my power scale of the Cell Saga, going super in-depth. As you could see, it got dark in here, even darker than it ever was before. We'll go even further beyond. I'll change the lights in here a little bit too to make it, less Cellish, I guess. Less like I'm in the Matrix, Mr. Anderson. What is real? How do you define real, as Morpheus would say in that case? So what do you guys think? Do you agree or disagree with my particular takes, my power levels, my scaling, and everything else I showed you throughout the course of this arc? Additionally, not just that, but like I said before, I have a new book out, The Children of Mon, Nemesis of the Absence, which I have been working on a very long time. So highly recommend checking it out. Last cheap plug of the video, but this is something that I think is definitely worth your time and investment. If you like all the work I've made, this is something that's my truest passion project that I have put so much time and effort into and over these years, and there's going to be even more to come with that in the future. But speaking of that, guys, thanks for watching, and stick around, because there's a lot more to come in the future, unless an evil robot shows up and terminates me. Hasta la vista, baby.
And you better subscribe!